Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to episode 34 of the Stevie Richards Show. Today we are going to continue our coverage and talk about the stuff in the ring and also backstage concerning ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal, from April 13th, 1997. 1997, by the way, that's when Mil Mascaras was never eliminated from the Royal Rumble. He's still in it, according to my co-host, James Romero, with a YouTube channel that's probably going to hit 100,000 before this one. At least that's what the fans
someone
want.
send you
I
that?
saw your comment. Yes. Stooges,
Yes, someone said that comment.
Stooges everywhere. Yeah.
No, this is never going to happen, man. I'm at 21,000, which I think is really impressive considering I never actually publicized it ever, which I'm quite pleased with that.
No, it's a great channel. I love watching the commentary, the backdrop, the different look, the way you basically can organically break this down and talk. It takes a lot of skill. I'm not just blowing smoke. It takes a lot of skill to not have your thoughts get ahead of yourself, and then you got to do another take. Then you got to do another take. These look like all one-take things. You do them, you react to the news, and it's very thoughtful, insightful, which, by the way, we're going to get to something in a minute after the plugs. I have a really good story. We have a new fan of the show, by the way, and an interesting not correction from last week, because we try to do corrections on certain things, but additional information based on what I said during the Joey Styles clip.
So that'll be interesting. Well, before we get into that, let's do the plugs very quickly. I've got two books, one on Owen Hart, one on The Rock. My channel, of course, James Romero channel, where occasionally when I've got the time, I'll just react to some of the news. And I appreciate you saying it looks organic, because it's anything but. I sit and take ages to write stuff down.
No, when you record, it's all one take, right? You're just talking.
Yeah, but if you realize why I'm not looking at the camera that often, it's because I'm constantly referring to my notes, like all the time. That's all I do. So I'm just like,
oh, so how dare you be prepared? You're saying,
I know.
I'm just saying, how dare you be prepared in order to give the most amount of information as possible?
Because I'm horrible. I will forget everything, and then I'll just ramble and go, just anyway, it doesn't matter. James Romero channel, if you're that way inclined. The Stevie Richards Fitness channel, of course, if you're that way inclined regarding your fitness, you want to know the best gym equipment out there, the do's from the do not do's and all that kind of thing. I encourage you all to go follow that and subscribe on YouTube. There is also Stevie Richard Cameo, which since we've started mentioning it on the show has blown up, which is wonderful news as well. So if you want a cameo from Stevie Richards, he is still doing those. The link is in the description. And most of all, the Patreon, the Stevie Richards Show Patreon. What can fans expect for their monthly fee for the exclusive content that we produce for that show?
Well, two things. Number one, for the producer tier, right now, we just recorded a watch along of the three-way dance from Barely Legal, myself, the Sandman, and Terry Funk. Everything from the promo before that match to Terry Funk winning the ECW World Title. I know, spoiler alert, sorry about that. What is it? 28 years later, I spoiled everybody. But on top of that, I started to produce a video for the $1 thank you, brother. People like when I say that for some reason. Maybe one person doesn't, but everybody else seems okay with it. Started recording the workflow, the pre-production, how I prepare everything, what we do, and the post-production to show you how the Stevie Richards Show is created. We do have a behind-the-scenes tour updated for 2025 coming to the YouTube channel, but this Patreon goes into a lot more detail, obsessive detail, as my friend, the Mr. Mythos. You got to check his channel out. He does a lot of mysteries and stuff on angels and demons, and just, I love these mystery channels. That's why we keep talking about me possibly doing that. But as far as Patreon, behind the scenes, watch alongs, and all sorts of stuff. See, I didn't have any notes. I rambled on and on about that too. So, do you want to know who the new fan of the Stevie Richards Show is? Or
is it a he? Is it a well-known fan? Is it 20 questions?
It's, well, you know what I can do? I can read the text from our fan here and see. Let me find it here. All right, I found it. Hey, idiot. The crucifixion spot was effing great. Salmon was right. Stop talking about me. When I see you, I'm going to... Oh, no, wait, that's from Raven. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. My bad. No, New fan of the show.
We never did the joke. You know, the Raven joke, which is actually a good joke, is that the reason that we had to do a crucifix instead of a Star of David is because the Star of David would have rolled away.
Who came up with that joke? Did he say that?
I think it's actually Raven.
My goodness. Oh, he didn't send me that text, but only probably because he doesn't have my number. I probably would have got that text a long time ago. Basically, new fan of the show and always a friend. And I couldn't overstate this enough. Joey Styles is one of the most upstanding, good dudes that you'll ever meet in or out of wrestling. And he sent a text. He was just very busy, wasn't able to get back to me. So it was the same number and basically said, no, you were correct about everything except towards the end of ECW. I did help create and manage the company website, and I created and managed the 900 number. That's how long ago this was. So you and James do a great job, or do a great job on the show. Your honest and insight is interesting and entertaining. So
he enjoys my insight on ECW then.
He enjoys that, yeah. He thinks, no, Joey's always been very objective about what ECW was. I mean, he loved it for what he did and everything and what it brought. And there's still people like myself and Sandman and Todd Gordon, myself and Todd Gordon. There's people that keep in touch 20, 30 years later, and that's pretty awesome. So we have our own, taste in what we like, but that's what made ECW so special. And as we go through part 2 in this episode, you're going to see. That's what I think is missing from wrestling today. There really aren't 31 different flavors of wrestling on a show. That's the big contention with AEW a lot, is everything's the same. People working the same body parts. There's a million super kicks and DDTs and going to the
same
outside.
with WWE,
but I
man.
was going to say
it's
same
so
with
the same.
Well, WWE is a whole different story. They like to beat it to death. They take a good thing, like say the organic camera angles with the steady cam going up the aisle or through the crowd into the ring, or the pull aparts. And now, however many weeks into Netflix, Raw is like every single week there's that thing. Just like at the end of SmackDown, someone's going through a table at the end of SmackDown every single week. So both are guilty of that.
Speaking of the corrections, actually, there's one with Joey that I need to make. But one, please come back, Joey. We miss you. We miss you on the screen, for goodness sake, Joey. I love Joey Styles. He was great. There's one thing I did get slightly wrong. When I was saying he was released by, I think it was like Evolve and some other like indies who were working around. Apparently, I don't know if it was a line he said, but I believe it was a line that was, I think he was told not to say beforehand. That might be Gabe Sapolsky's explanation, but then said anyway. I'm gonna end up doing another correction next week because I've already probably garbled the story myself. But once again, I mean, for goodness sake, come back, Joey. We need you.
Yeah, but I said he's an upstanding, awesome dude. So like, that's easy to stay out of the wrestling business as well. I would love to see Joey. Joey would be a great resource to teach a new crop of commentators how to commentate. JR, same thing. A lot of other people. There has to be. I always thought there should be, much like in the NFL, a kind of like symposium for former players or people in the business or people in the sport to become broadcasters, analysts, production people, directors, to give you another career after your career. And I wish wrestling would do that. The Performance Center does have, I believe, rooms like Stanford had where you can practice commentary and do things. And I urge anybody in wrestling, when you have access to something like that, use it. Look at Corey Graves. I mean, there's a lot of news about Corey Graves and the heat with him and McAfee, which might lead to, if it's a storyline work, we don't know. But Corey, his career could have been over, but Hunter gave him the opportunity to be a commentator. You can like or dislike or whatever, but Corey does something that's extremely hard to do week in and week out on live TV. And I wish other wrestlers would consider that path sooner rather than after their spine is already destroyed.
I, for what it's worth, I mean, I know it's completely not the same thing, but like when we do our shows, when I do my podcast, when you do your YouTube stuff elsewhere, you won't believe how good you get or how much improved you get by just doing things repetition. And I think when people... I don't know, maybe it's almost... Not everyone can be a Jerry Lawler. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, he was fantastic on promos, but then how many people have been great on promos and then gone into commentary and been terrible?
Mm-hmm.
And so many people have done that. But the thing is that if you've got the facilities to practice, work out, listen back to yourself, be honest with yourself about what's working, what's not working, and how you can change that. I mean, it behooves everybody, if they're serious about staying in any business for the long haul and, you know, wants to transition from one area of expertise to another, I mean, if the facilities are there, use them.
Well, here's my theory on Lawler. By the way, Lawler had a career for decades before he even became a commentator. But what do you remember Jerry Lawler as being? One of the greatest color commentators in history. When he was literally the king of Memphis. But I'm saying that's how he could have an even better career and somehow make more money not taking bumps unless he wanted to. And he also worked indies, and he was double and triple dipping. He was like every worker's dream to be able to make multiple streams of income that way. But the reason why I believe Lawler was really, really good on commentary, and this is why I believe we're also very good at what we do, because we can step back and put other people over. We don't have that wall in front of us where, yeah, I'm going to put him over, but how am I going to get over? Lawler would completely immerse himself in what was going on outside of himself and not always bring it back to Jerry Lawler. As a matter of fact, he never did. That's what makes a great commentator.
Yeah,
Jesse did it
used
too.
To ignore Memphis. It's like if people brought up Memphis or whatever, he just, yeah, that's old news. Let's talk about it now. You know, for someone who was such a big deal back in the day, he never particularly, aside from the fact that he had the crown and the outfit, he was just the king. It wasn't referring to, or he wasn't specifically referring to being the king back in Memphis for all those decades and how over he was and how many sellouts he had. It's almost like two complete different versions of the King character.
I would like to know, my assumption is he was an Elvis fan, so he just took the King from that. He's in Memphis, it's natural or whatever.
Elvis died, and then he declared himself the King, I think.
And he became a babyface after that. How's that?
Yeah.
Wow, welcome to wrestling. You literally stole Elvis Presley's gimmick in Memphis, and the people loved you. I would love to see in the beginning if people, like, if he was...
He was a heel at the time. I believe in 77 he was a heel at the time. Yeah, I hope so. Do you know what? I'm sure the historians out there correct me. I can never remember when Lawler turned babyface and they turned... anyway. But
maybe
that being said, I mean...
When he got the book?
It's not... yeah, that wouldn't have hurt. Because he was still on Goulas's TV, I think, in 77. I think it was it 79? Was it 77 where they split off? Oh, I need Dutch. Dutch will be able to tell me. Anyway,
that's actually a great clip for Dutch to have to really tell the behind the scenes story of how Jerry the King Lawler was born. Was he a babyface? Was he a heel? What was the temperature in Memphis when he did that? Because these people were really passionate. They were just as, if not more passionate about Elvis Presley as their wrestling, I'm sure. So they probably didn't take too kindly to that at first.
This is coming out on Friday. I'm going to release a video beforehand as well. So Dutch Mantell is back home. He's returned, and he's expressed to me he's very keen to get the podcast. I keep telling him, just take it easy, buddy. I mean, just, it's fine. It's like, no, let's do it. Let's get on with it. So that being said, can someone write questionsfordutch@gmail.com and just remind me to ask him the question of what the temperature in the room was when Jerry started becoming the king and whether he did it the week after Elvis died. I think that's the story, but anyway, I'm getting everyone to do my work for me there. But anyway, let's leave that there. Let's draw a line under it. We've got obviously Barely Legal Part 2. It doesn't matter how long this show's going to take. We need to get through this pay-per-view so we can move on to something else finally. But before we do, we've got a few bits of news. And the big controversy, if you can call it that, I guess, over this past week, Jeff Jarrett weighed in recently and just said, people, get over yourselves. And for the most part, he's absolutely right. Because it's not that big of a deal.
There you go.
The big debate, and it's AEW Grand Slam, Brisbane, Australia, a.k.a. AEW Collision, because that's ended up what it ended up being, is that AEW used a smaller ring for the big show. They use a 20 by 20 ring usually, or nearly always. They have used 18 by 18 a few times on TV, I think, over the years. But that being said, Tony Khan never arranged a 20 by 20 ring to be shipped over, and there were no 20 by 20 rings locally. So, did you notice it when you saw Grand Slam or clips of Grand Slam? Did you notice the ring looked different just immediately?
A little bit. Where I noticed it now in hindsight was those really long arena crowd shots where it looked really good. The building looked really good. The TV looked really good. The ring looked exceptionally small from that. On the hard camera, I couldn't really tell, except it seemed like, because I guess the building and where you put a hard camera, usually above level in the ring, like not apron level, but it seemed like it was a little bit off, either, I believe, lower than it usually is. Did you feel that way? And that kind
of looked like it was dipping slightly. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Usually you have to pick an exact point to put the hard camera, and then obviously the camera people and some of the production. And usually that's tarped off or nobody can sit there. But it's usually always a little above eye level where you can see over the top rope into the ring. This felt lower. I gotta look back at it, but it felt like it was lower, which gave me another clue that it wasn't the same exact ring. Now, this whole thing, you've talked about the ticket controversy. You talked about all the stuff with promoting it as a pay-per-view or a TV and the confusion for months over that. This has to be one of the first things you should do, because this is the number one safety factor. And Jeff, I'm not clutching my pearls or anything. I'm just saying the first thing I would want to do is make sure we have our ring so our talent does not potentially get hurt. That's it.
And you don't know if you're borrowing a ring as well. You can't guarantee the safety of it or how it's made, I guess, as well. That's something else I want to ask you about.
That is the most terrifying thing about working like indies from town to town. Unless you're traveling with WWE, AEW, TNA back in the day with Memphis or anything, you are traveling with the same ring usually because you're always in a loop. But when you have something like this and you're counting on somebody in the area or the country to have your size ring, much less a ring that's been vetted, a ring that's been inspected, the boards are good, the canvas is good, the ring posts aren't going to sag in a little bit. You pointed that out a little bit. It's not going to quite be there. Even the under part of the ring where you tie the metal cabling to the ring post to make sure they stay upright, you can't take any chance with this. Now, Tony Khan could have bought a ring and had it shipped to Australia, or bought a ring or had it made over there in Australia and just left it there. I think WWE does that. They have warehouses where the rings are in Europe or the UK or the West Coast. They get picked up and they get brought to the building. I may be off base with that. But internationally, WWE for a fact has rings pretty much in every country, and it's their ring.
Now, at first I thought it was a 16 by 16 ring. It was 18 by 18. QT Marshall sort of clarified that on his Twitter. And the other thing was, I also wanted to make mention of, and I'm sure you've got very many opinions on this, is how bouncy the ring was compared to a regular 20 by 20 ring that we see in AEW or WWE. Is bouncy always better? Is it bouncy always safer to take bumps on?
Bouncy in theory. This is where, over time, I'm sort of coming back to the middle where I'm not quite sure, because when I would I bumped in the WrestleMania 3 ring when I worked in independent up in Wisconsin. As a matter of fact, Kevin Nash would refuse to powerbomb me because it was that stiff. Like to the point where he was walking on it and felt it in his knees and hips and stuff like that. So you would say, oh, the bouncy ring's great. It's like a mattress, or it's like a trampoline or whatever. But you run the risk that we talk about many, many times, and we're going to talk about Dakota Kai later. When she got knocked out from the Zoe Stark dropkick, the ring bit her and bounced up. That's usually like the worst thing that happens with the ring being bouncier. So I'm sort of in the middle. I'd obviously not like the WrestleMania 3 ring or the old WWF rings. They're like Formica, like a countertop. But I would like it to have some sort of durability. Now, when it bounces that much, the first thing I would look at being the ring crew is, and you start to see those posts kind of go in a little bit, I would be very worried about things happening, as far as the ring collapsing or stuff like that. By the way, this bugs me already. I do apologize for that. I was wondering, I put the camera on auto in the garage gym because it never turns out right on manual. And I was wondering why I was so washed out. Did it look bad? We shouldn't start over.
No, for God's sake, no, absolutely not. Right.
Sorry, everybody.
With the 18 by 18 rings, right? Loads of people used 18 by 18, TNA and ECW and da-da-da-da-da. But the thing is that, especially WCW, for me, even as a teenager, I knew there was something a bit B-show about WCW, and I think it was probably the ring more than anything else, especially when, as you mentioned, Kevin Nash or your Hogans, your Giants, your Lugers, your Stings, everyone was so huge in WCW, they just almost swallowed up, all the space in the ring. And I remember even when they filmed it, they always used to have someone in one of the corners on the apron sort of shooting downwards for quite a lot of the shots, quite a lot of the years. And it always made the ring look so small. So maybe I'm a bit more in tune with spotting smaller rings, whereas AEW, they can get away with it a bit more because on average, the main event players are smaller in size as well. So it's not quite as pronounced, I guess, a size difference. But once again, is this something that you just spotted immediately? And did it bug you, the size difference?
No, it didn't bug me. I was just happy to see that it looked like a mostly full house with all the drama that everybody had to put up with, and especially the talent flying all the way over. It's got to be, a full day of travel, like a literally 24-hour day of travel. And for them to fly over, and if it was half empty or a quarter full or whatever, that's not, you went all that way to do that. So when I saw the house was mostly full, I was pretty happy about that. The smaller rings, and that WCW point you made up, it's in theory, having the cameraman in that corner is like, I remember Hogan was beating up Vader and slapping him, and they had that cameraman right there. They looked like they were in a toy ring because they were so tall and so big, and it was shot down that the ring looked like, it was literally looked like the video game Q*bert, where you have like the tiles straight down. And it's not a great analogy, but you know what I'm saying? It was like some kind of forced perspective.
Yeah, it was like a fisheye lens as well, or at least it came across like that because it was so close. I don't know.
I think because they were so big and the ring was so low underneath them and everything that it just made it look like we're having technical difficulties all over the place and the microphone
Smashing
and everything.
The place up.
But it did not stick out to me. It stuck out to me in WCW, obviously, and I went from ECW to WCW, and it still felt a little different, even though both rings were 18 by 18 rings. I've wrestled in 16 by 16. After WWE, you can't exist in a 16 by 16. It was hard because I always felt like my head was going to hit the ropes from bumping backwards. And that's when you have bigger guys that are in the ring. And AEW's lucky they didn't have like that Indian guy that's what was with Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt. What if he had to take a back bump in the ring? He would probably hit the ropes because he's so used to the extra 2 feet, 2 by 2. Then WWE being, 20 by 20 as well, gives you that room. So we did the secrets of the ring before. We can do like the differences again and what you have. But if you were to ask me today, I would prefer not a bouncy ring, and I would prefer 20 by 20 just to have room to work.
Yeah, in fact, that pretty much was what I was going to ask you, but I'll sort of leave that there for a second. Did you find that in an 18 by 18 ring, and especially with AEW, with how many people do high flying and just quick matches, basically, speeding through the moves, is it just a lot easier in an 18 by 18 ring because, hitting your ropes constantly, doing dives and stuff? Does that, taking out that extra step, that extra 2 feet, help you?
Yeah, but if you take out the extra step and you're used to the extra step, now your timing's completely off on both ends. In other words, when you go from an 18-foot ring to a 20-foot from, say, ECW, WCW to WWE, I had to get in the ring a few times, and you had an extra step to a step and a half, depending upon how tall you are, how long your legs are. Going from that to a smaller thing, think about it. I just said it about the big Indian guy. What if you're taking a springboard drop kick or you're doing something and you're supposed to go through the ropes or something, but you find you don't have that extra step to tumble through the ropes, and you find yourself like halfway hitting your hip against the rope, and you haven't, you know what I mean? You're expecting to be drop kicked, knocked back a step or two, and then tumble through and hook the middle rope. Throws everything off, catching a cross body, dropping an elbow, doing a moonsault, positioning a guy or a girl where you think they need to be like a little bit in from a 20-foot ring, and you overshoot them by a foot. These are real adjustments, and that's why I said the number one thing you had to do when booking Australia or anywhere else where you don't have access to drive the ring on a tractor trailer to the building, you ship that ring, you buy a dedicated ring that stays over there. That's got to be number one. And I don't know what the chain of command or what the management is on that side of the logistics for AEW, but whoever it is, you have to think of that. And it should be Tony Khan, number one, or Bryan Danielson still kind of in the office and Tony's right-hand man, right?
I'm not sure he's going physically to any offices, but I suspect he's one of his advisors, yeah.
All I'm saying is if a worker who's like really conscientious of making sure that they have everything they need, the number one thing you need is the ring. And I can also tell stories here or on Patreon, separate episodes about how we work shows when the ring didn't show up. Because there's been plenty.
Should we talk about Buddy Matthews now? I don't know if he jokingly blamed the ring for rolling his ankle, but do you have the footage that you can play us and basically tell us how it's happened?
Sure. I got it right here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, James, I want to point out whoever did this has he with me because they stole my gimmick right here, circling it. But good job analyzing it. We're going to go up here. Here's my theory. We're going to play it straight through, but I have the theory pretty much on deck here. Boom. Slow-mo. Ow. Now, this is usually when you roll, you don't have this leg so far out. So all the weight is down on that ankle right here. It's kind of a weird, I think Buddy Matthews thought he was going to do the hop over thing, land and kind of do that twist, like where you just got to kind of go, you know what I mean? You kind of fancily go over the top rope, spin your body, and you go towards the other corner. That didn't really work out for him. Whew, he's okay, huh? Or is he not?
No, he's not. He's on crutches now.
Oh, man.
And he's not a small boy, is he? Either, to put all that weight
No,
on.
and like I said, with this leg being all the way out here, all this weight is coming right down on that ankle. Like all the weight is right there. Now, here's my theory about that. My theory about why this happened is it's a freak thing. That could be part of it. But he was so excited about working in his home country. He was so excited and just ready to get in the ring, so pumped up. And for some reason, Murphy's Law, when that happens and you're out of sorts and you don't have that poise and that presence or the total poise and presence, just bad things happen. Like I said, it's more Murphy's Law. Home country. I think he went over too, right?
No, he lost.
Is Vince McMahon booking AEW?
Of the 5 matches on AEW Collision with local or at least New Zealand talent, 4 of them lost.
Wow. I would have never guessed that.
Well, in the first match, it's Carl Fletcher. He's a heel. No one wanted him to win anyway. Second one was Harley Cameron, who everyone wanted to win, and she didn't. Third match was Jay White, who there was nothing even on the line in that match, and for some reason he was on the losing end with Adam Copeland. Adam Copeland was the one who ended up getting submitted to death, and then Buddy Matthews lost, but then finally Tony Storm won. So that's exactly what I said. I went, is Vince McMahon booking this show? Because that's what he does.
Did somebody kiss Tony Khan's ass on the show while we're at it from Australia? But that's what I think. I think it's one of those things. I've been there and every wrestler's been there. In your own hometown, you're going back to your home country. You're very excited, and that excitement. I just see a little bit like when he went over, he had a little bit of extra oomph in to get in the ring. Like, I'm really intense. And this part of the ring here, I'll go back to it. This part of the ring here is one of the most dangerous parts. That's why I don't want to understand why people do the apron bumps and everything. Because usually, and it looks like, from what I'm seeing here, James, it looks like I'm used to like having like divots and bumps in this part of the ring, and they usually tuck it in the middle, and then towards the edges and the apron is where you get the instability and it's not completely flat. But this does look pretty flat, but I can see what you're saying. Look, this could also have something to do with it. The bouncy ring, and number two, dude, that's at like a 10 to 15 degree angle. The ring post, do you see that? That could have something to do with it too.
So you think like maybe the apron could be on a bit of a slant or a bit of a dip, and that could have caused, or maybe it just has so much flex and give, maybe that could have caused it.
The flex, the bounciness, but also what I'm looking at here is it looks like the actual ring, not the apron, but the mat is like lower than the skirt. Do you see that? Like sunk in a little bit. So when you zoom in, right there, like a zoom in on the ankle. I must. How's that? I must do it. But it looks like, I mean, it looks flat in a way, but it also looks like what you said, the bounciness, and right where he landed, it looks like it's sinking down a bit on that. Dare I say it, in a stiffer ring, I'm not sure if he would have been injured any less, but maybe the stiffness would have prevented it from rolling so much, because that's a full-on, like his, I'm going to do it again. I must. Dude, the bottom of his foot is completely like pointed that way to the other corner of the ring. That's a full-on, and dare I say it, he would have been better off breaking his ankle than spraining it, twisting it, tearing the ligaments, tearing the tendons. The recovery time from a broken bone is always a lot less than when you're tearing all that stuff, or he just strained everything and it's just going to be a nagging injury for a guy that uses a lot of jumps, a lot of running, a lot of, aerial stuff. And then you're going to land on that. Like, even if you're going to come down with a double axe handle, he's going to be feeling that for months. If not, even this could be a thing like with my back or my neck or other things where that injury is just going to creep up for the rest of his life.
I mean, it might not. I mean, you might be fine afterwards.
Look at it.
Just what I'm thinking of. There's no padding on the turnbuckles, which I think people think that, the actual bit where you hit your back on when you're whipped into the corner is the turnbuckles, but the turnbuckle is actually the metal strut that keeps the ropes to the post, and there's no padding. Oh,
you mean the padding that covers that with like the WWE has the black Velcro things and stuff like that. So this is unprotected right here. But dare I say it, if it was, I would say that would probably have accounted for him slipping. But there's no accounting for the slipping because he has a good grip on these metal turnbuckles.
I think it's just a freak thing, really. I mean, it must be. I mean, I've rolled my ankle, never that badly, but I mean, I was saying off air, I've had some shoes that for whatever reason, they just got me prone to rolling my ankle, but I just got so used to it. I think I've probably got the strongest ankles in the world now. I've got rid of them. Not my ankles, the shoes. Right, we're going to move.
Don't wrestle in Australia. Don't wrestle in Australia to test that theory out.
God, no, we won't. Next, we're going to, and this is something, man, this has got so many follow-on questions as well, but this was a bit of a point of contention on WWE Raw this past Monday, the Finn Balor Kickout. So, during the main event of WWE Raw on Netflix, Seth Rollins hit a pedigree on Finn Balor, and what was meant to be a kickout at 2.9 ended up being a kickout at something like 3.4. So, over to you, Stevie. Play it all the way through. Play it all the way through, man.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Yeah, this was very, very odd. Hey, by the way, Finn Balor is wearing your Nikes. There he is.
He needs to watch his ankles.
I'm telling you, the Atomics were bad enough, even though they did have great ankle support. But wearing sneakers into the ring, And it's just kind of odd wearing it with no kick pads or anything like that. At least Seth, I think he has atomics on or some form of that with the kick pads. All right, let's play it straight through and see what happens. Nice pedigree. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Wow. That's not even close. Let's go slow-mo with that. 1, 2, 3. 3.4
Yeah.
is right.
Yeah.
What do you think? I'm going to ask you your opinion about that. What do you think about that? What do you think happened? Because usually I'll preface it with this. There was a lot of times, I don't know if they do it now, but they would count 1. So if you're not looking, you hear the audible 1, 2, 3.4.
It can only be one of two things. I mean, you've had your head rattled or you've had a total brain fart, I guess.
How about this? Right here, Finn cannot see the referee, but the cadence should be enough for him to hear it. So you think his bell was rung?
Well, why don't we look at the pedigree again? I don't think so. It looked like a fairly safe... I mean, it wasn't the old-style Triple H ones.
No, his head never hit. Look. His head never hit. They did a good camera switch. No, he didn't even touch. Yeah, he never hit. So what do you think? Do you think something before this kind of knocked him silly?
I don't know.
Because he took a great bump. He wasn't out on his feet. Or do you think it was just a lapse? Do you think... I mean, you should be able, even if the ref doesn't do 1, 2, you hear the canvas being struck with the count. Very strange. I'm going to go through that again. 1, 2. I mean, his hand even, like, he didn't even pause on the half or slide. You know, some of them go like this to kind of slide. His hand hit for the 3. I mean, Seth was going over anyway. So here's another question. He's going over anyway. Do you just ring the bell and stop the match?
We'll get to the referee in a minute. Why don't I ask you this? Has this ever happened to you? Where someone's either, or you or someone you've worked with has forgotten to kick out?
Not that I recall. I've been involved in places where people have gotten hurt, especially myself, where they just counted. Or where the guy at work said we're going home or covered me and told the refs count to 3. And the refs were told count to 3 no matter what. See, that's the part where there's an old, and Dutch can speak to this. I think this is as old as the wrestling business. When the referee counts, if you don't kick out and you're supposed to kick out, it's your fault. Because then stuff like this makes everybody look bad and makes it look phony and fake. So the referees are usually instructed, you count. And I would instruct the referee, count to 3. If I don't kick out, if he doesn't kick out, it's our fault. That keeps everything honest, objective, simple, and almost like a shoot, where each ref's count is legitimate. But this exposes it as, this wasn't supposed to happen.
But how do you do a 2.9 then? How do you do a 2.9? Oh, it was so close count if you're calling it as a shoot then?
Well, because the kick out starts, this could be a whole video. When it's 1 and 2 9 or 2 and 2 9ths or 2 and 2.5 or whatever it is, the actual kick out where the person's legs come up and they push the guy off does literally start at 2 because the shoulders are technically still down unless you're doing 1, 2, shoot up. You know what I mean? The actual kickouts for close false finishes start when the legs come off the mat for the kick out. If you're doing the shoulder up, you got a little bit more, but usually right after 2, and when you do the shoulder up, you can see almost everybody. They're looking at the referee. You know what I mean? You see the whites of their eyes looking at the ref. But I don't know. I would, for me, because I was so OCD, I would pay attention to how refs count. Like Nick Patrick's count was a very light count. Charles Robinson's a very heavy Tommy Young count. John Finnegan, Jim Molyneux, Jeff Jones and ECW, their counts were all different. There's a psychology to paying attention to how a referee counts. And, the most guys get in the ring, or girls, they think the referee is just kind of there to count. The referee's there for communication. The referee's there for safety. And the referee style is every bit a part of the match, if not more, especially with this, than anything else. I don't know if they treat the referees as integral parts of the match as much as they should. I don't think they do.
What would you look at? Would you look at the referee's face? Would you look at the referee's hand?
Usually the referee's hand. Obviously, you're not going to see it as it comes down if you're rolling back. But sometimes I would tell people too, depending upon what they're doing, try to cross-face me into the direction the referee's counting. Because now I'm looking, but there's a reason I'm looking there. And what I can do then is I'm looking this way, and I can shoot away or towards the crossface. In other words, if somebody's cross-facing you and their fist is this way, you're not kicking out this way. You're kicking out towards the fist because that's where the leverage is easiest to go against. Dude, people make fun of me for wrestling so many years to pay attention to that level of detail, but that needs to be done. I'd rather you be obsessive than be lazy. And I have a feeling that it's not on Seth and Finn. This could be, once again, another freak thing like with the Buddy Matthews, but it's tough. I would have either gone and counted to 3 and called some audible aftermath of people hitting the ring or whatever to leave it in chaos, or you kick out earlier. Then you might piss Seth Rollins off because it's the pedigree and you kicked out right at 2. I don't know. Definitely a botch. And I know some people don't like that word, but that's what it was. It was a mistake.
You mean Chris Jericho doesn't like that word?
I'm sure there's other people that don't like the word, but it's a mistake.
Back in the day, when you were with WWE, who would Vince McMahon have been more upset with, Finn or the referee?
If I could rephrase the answer, what would I do? I would do this. The referees are easy targets for everything. The referees get bitched out a lot. At least when I was there, they got bitched out a lot. They got rode a lot. They don't get treated well. And like I said, they get treated sometimes like an afterthought. And Jimmy Corderas, once again, I bring that up if you want to ever interview him, could speak about those stories. Kyoto could speak about it. These are 2 guys that are not in WWE anymore and could be a little bit more honest about the way things go. I would take the heat 100% of the time. And I would encourage, and usually if it's a really solid dude that I'm working, we would take the heat together and not put it on the referee. Then if you say something like, I usually like all the referees, but specifically if it was Charles Robinson, I would definitely protect him at all costs because I love him like a brother. Now I would be tempted and tell him, I'm putting all the heat on you. This is your fault because we were friends. But I would never let Charles take a bullet for me when the referees are treated substandardly in a lot of situations.
In a lot of the companies you work for the most part, what were referees' instructions regarding that kind of situation? Would they be told, call it down the middle, call it not as a shoot? I understand there's a difference there, but if someone forgets to kick out, do you just count 3? Or is it like back in the 80s and let's say it's a Hulk Hogan title match, and if the referee for some reason, I don't know if Hulk Hogan forgets to kick out and it's the old George Steele line, I think. It goes 1, 2, and then if George Steele, let's say, is pinning Hulk Hogan for the title, and for some reason Hogan's not kicking out, then George Steele will pretend to have a heart attack and fall off him. Like protect the babyface at all costs kind of things. Which companies would do the former and which would do the latter?
Well, a lot of times it would be treated like it's a shoot match. If the guy doesn't break on 5, disqualify him. If the tag ropes aren't used, it's not a tag. If the guys get caught cheating too much, disqualify them. And of course, always act like you're counting the 3. And if we do not kick out, it's our fault. That's something they would say it in meetings in WWE, but it was policed within the match. Not even in the roster or the locker room, but within the actual match. And I remember even up until my last day, I would remind the referee, dude, just count. If I don't kick out, it's my fault. If he doesn't kick out, it's his fault. I don't know why I always said that. There must have been something that happened or something I witnessed a little bit too much that I said, I don't want Vince to get that mad about that kind of, because I would get more mad about this than getting mad about a count. Now, there was one famous thing that I witnessed at WrestleMania 2000, the hardcore title match. Remember with Bob Holly winning it, but it was a weird count. And that exposes the business way worse than just counting the three.
For those who don't know it, there was like 12 people or 15 people, and you could pin each other as many times.
Everybody got hard weight in that match too, dude. And Pete Gas was gushing blood. It was ugly. That was a real fight.
The issue with that, because I think, was it Hardcore Holly smashed Crash over the head with like a jar?
A candy jar. Yeah.
And then I think the idea was there was only going to be like, the clock was going to run on to 0 at the count of 2. I think that was like the idea.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to win, but he won it as a shoot because the ref counted.
But because it was Tim White, I seem to remember. But the thing is, he counts 1, 2, and then he does the miss for the third. So I don't know if that tells me that Crash was meant to kick out.
I don't know. I think it was more the time was supposed to run out because Crash was going to barely survive it, the Houdini of hardcore type thing. And in the time wasn't. I would have rather see in that way, like with the Scorpio Benoit match, they timed it perfectly for the draw. Remember, actually Scorpio won over right before it, so I got that wrong, I think. But there's been many draws where they try to get cute with the 2 count and then the bell rings. I would rather err on the side of caution than no count or a 1 count. No count would be even better. Like, oh, the bell, he had him pinned. You know what I mean? You get too close to that, just like with this, you run into problems that could occur and usually do.
Right then, one more what went wrong, and this is your specific one that you want to discuss on this episode, and it involves Dakota Kai wrestling Ivy Nile. Once again, WWE Raw just gone this past Monday. So I have absolutely no idea what you're going to say now, so I'm looking forward to it. So, Stevie, over to you. What went wrong?
Thank you, James. Well, I'm going to say both girls worked hard, and it was a really good match up until this point. And the reason why I want to point this out specifically to Dakota Kai is because, number one, Road Dogg is super high on her, and she's getting a push. She's worked hard. She's overcome injuries. I think she's still probably feeling the effects of that concussion that she suffered, but she's working through it, and she is improving. But there's some points with this where she still has the NXT style of work to her and not fully in WWE, and it's not forgivable at this point, and it should be coached in a way to improve. That's not this spot that I'm talking about, but I'm saying she has something called Hot Wheels feet that a lot of people seem to have. Like, I'm going to whip you there, and then I'm going to kind of run backwards and run in a circle and come back. And I've done it early in my career and probably sometimes late in my career, and where you take the lap around to run back to the corner. You know, these little tropes of wrestling. This one went wrong segment has to do with something that's completely contrived. This move is completely wrong, and it probably hurt Ivy Nile, and she totally made it look like nothing because she picked her right back up and hit her with the finish after this move, which was essentially real. So I'm going to just play the spot. Then I'm going to go into the finish after this. Sets her up. I'm going to stop right here. Now, what does this tell you right here? Does that not look assisted?
Yes.
Okay, so number one right there, it's fake. You put her in a position. She's through the ropes, like Randy Orton would do something like this to do the DDT. But she throws her down, and Ivy Nile's doing a pike push-up here and waiting as she's hooking her. She's doing all the work. So it's phony and fake right away. Then she's waiting. Boom. Do you see that?
Play it through without the
Sorry.
the dragging through. So I didn't really get that.
I'm going to go right from here. Right from the beginning. Push up, hooks, jumps, spikes are right on top of the head, for real. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
They cut the camera. I'm going to go in slow motion. Steps right on the back of her head and puts the top of her head to where she's doing that push-up. She can't protect herself, kind of like you can with a DDT or any of this other stuff. So basically, she goes straight down onto her head, and also she's waiting for it. Boom, right there. Now, afterwards, what does she do? Like, that's a devastating move that should really hurt her. Does she cover? No. She literally just picks her right back up. And I think the referee knows. Look at the referee. Right in there, checking on her, looking at her, saying, "Are you okay?" And I don't even know if she's answering because the referee's grabbing her hand to see if she's going to squeeze.
Yes, I was going to say, just to explain to people what the referee's doing there, she's asking, "If you're okay, squeeze my hand." Is that about right?
Yeah, which you don't do if it's a work move. You'll check. But this is like, or I don't know if she's still holding her. Look, she's talking. I don't think she has any she's still holding her hand. So is this girl out on her feet? But Dakota Kai has to get her stuff in and get the finish done rather than just covering. She's still, you know what I mean? I think she's out on her feet because she's kind of half dead weight here.
So, I hate to say, that's a better version of the GTS than Punk's.
Well, it's the version like Ruby Riott did it with the or who else does it? Mia Yim does it underneath the jaw. So it's like a Pele kick, not a GTS.
I rewatched this entire match and just before we went on air, and I was just like, it's so indicative of so many matches these days where there was just absolutely no music between the notes. So it's like the breath between the music or whatever you call it, or the space between the notes. It was just move to move. And what really got me was that Ivy Nile was working the knee and then went straight to an ankle lock to work the knee. I was like,
It's everybody's got to get their stuff in. There's no why to what you're watching at all. There's no story, and also there's no time to breathe. When I said it was a good match, fundamentally it was a good match. It just didn't make any sense, and it was forgettable. And the only reason I remember this is because, number one, that's what we do. We watch this stuff, we break it down, we analyze it. This is everything that's wrong with modern wrestling as far as trying to reinvent the wheel. Wouldn't it be cool? You know what no one's ever done before? You know what I haven't seen yet? Well, there's a reason why. This right here, playing again. Bam, right down on her. There's the shot right there, James. Look. Look at her head as I bring it up. That's her head going straight down and also laterally to the side, which could mean you could get a stinger, a pinched nerve in your neck, in your trap, in your shoulder. What? I mean, why? And this isn't, I don't blame Dakota Kai. You know why? I do in a way because you got to have enough sense to protect your opponent. The number one, if you want to talk about the prime directive, if you're a Star Trek fan, the prime directive in professional wrestling is to protect your opponent at all costs, even before yourself. Because your opponent, their prime directive is to protect you before themselves. It all works out in the end. But what we're looking at, I know you were looking at that for the thumbnail, right? But when we're looking at this, James, and this particular thing, this is somebody trying to reinvent the wheel and great intention. I'm trying to do something different. I'm trying to show the office that I can do these innovative things, these different things that you've never seen before. Unfortunately, you cannot safely do them. There's no way to safely do this. Also, On top of that, it's dangerous, it's real, it hurts, and it looks phony as F. This is so Ivy Nile is completely assisting in her demise and waiting for it. So that's a true what went wrong. And I know this day and age, and I would be that way too, if there was internet and social media and shows like this, picking apart my work and saying this and that in my immature stage of my life and career, I would take it so personally and I would probably hate that person. But as time went on, I realized I need people like that to show me, to coach me hard, to tell me, like I said before, what the F are you doing? They look like crap. And also, you hurt the person. Never do that again. So she's trying to get noticed. She's trying to get the push. She's trying to get more of a push. She's trying to get a title. She's trying to get over. These are all valiant, intentions. But Dakota Kai, guess what you can do to stand out? Guess what you can do to be different that nobody else is doing? Use that Jerry Lawler Memphis psychology. Get sympathy. Watch Tommy Dreamer. Watch him sell. Watch him get beat up. That's how you'll get over as a babyface, when the fans are sympathetic to you. The cool moves don't matter. That finish looks good. James is right. That's a really good kick. Why can't you hit it out of nowhere? Like I used to hit the Stevie kick out of nowhere, not just duck the clothesline kick. What if they crash and burn, come up, and you're right there to hit the kick without twisting them, grabbing their arm? Do you see what I mean? Try to figure out a way to hit that finish out of nowhere or out of everywhere. And now you're over. That's just my advice to you. I do not mean anything personal, and I don't want nobody likes anybody to be mad at them, but I'd rather you be mad at me than visiting Ivy Nile in the hospital after her neck surgery.
Okay, then, to the main event, as it were, of the show. We're finally going to be getting through the rest of ECW Barely Legal, ECW's first ever pay-per-view that Stevie Richards, our own Stevie Richards, semi-main evented, in fact, as well. And for the Patreon, we actually sat down and watched the entire match from entrance to the final bell of the evening as well. So if you want some additional insights of the match, then Patreon is the way to go. How about that for a plug?
That's a great plug. Thank you very much for that. It's so funny to look back at this stuff. I think after the watch along, I was like, looking at the stuff is kind of like looking at home movies, like the old camcorder footage growing up, where you look and you're 13 years old and you're awkward and everything. And we looked at the promo, and, I was able to put some of my real life awkwardness and cluelessness into that, and showing how I've kind of grown as a character and then as a young man. But yeah, this was definitely, this pay-per-view, the opportunity and everything was definitely something that even to this day, that I'm very grateful to Paul and to the other people on the roster that were on there, and even someone like Tommy Dreamer, who, stepped aside for Terry Funk, but also could have been easily been in that match instead of me. Could have been many people put in that spot. Incredible responsibility for a guy 23, 24 years old to be put into. In this day and age, and I repeat this all the time, people don't give enough credit to somebody in their early 20s, mid-20s, even under 30, that are making big money, having big matches, having pay-per-view type stuff. It's an incredible amount of pressure. Mm-hmm. Maybe these kids aren't aware of it yet and don't know anything different. So I'm not going to smarten you up to that, because you'll instantly be terrified. But I was very aware that this was a big deal. And to be that young and having that responsibility was no joke.
Yeah, I think it might be worth mentioning someone like MJF, who I think people don't quite realize just how young he started in AEW in a main event or near main event role, and he's someone who's still in his 20s. And hopefully going to be doing some good things with Adam Page soon. Right, before we get into the latter half of the show, this is something that I meant to ask on the last episode and I forgot to, is the ring. So once again, we're talking about the ring. ECW, I don't know if it had a different ring for this show or if it was mic'd differently, but it sure looked and sounded completely different to what we were used to beforehand.
Well, yeah, the ring we had in ECW was a death trap before this. We actually upgraded and got a new ring for the pay-per-view. But man, the ring before had bolts sticking out of it. And we were lucky we weren't doing a Buddy Matthews every single night. Watch that clip, because it was definitely ankle rolling material. It was nothing, we would take bumps and be like, oh, did you hit the ball out there? Yeah, I got the ball. There was all sorts of stuff and hazards in there. But yeah, they from what I saw, that was a brand new ring. It was a lot bouncier. It was louder. My suspicion was, and this lends to the theory, which was proven true, working with WWF at the time, which is WWE today, they were miking the ring to some extent. At least I thought they were, because it sounded like very loud, like a WWE ring. So I'm assuming it was mic'd. The crowd was not mic'd. They were every bit as loud as they would have been, if not louder, because they knew they were going to be on pay-per-view too and be part of the show. But the ring was definitely brand new, and my suspicion is the ring was mic'd to some extent.
One more thing is, I don't know, like for people who've not been to a live show, is the other thing that's mic'd is the ring bell. Because when that thing ding dings, my God, it is ear shattering, even if you're up in the heavens, right at the back. Do they have like a special mic, or does just the timekeeper just like jam the microphone next to it and ding ding?
Yeah, because the ring announcer's right there with the microphone to announce a winner or do whatever, come into the ring for the introductions. So yeah, that they would usually hold it and do that. Or the microphone would just lay on the table. It wouldn't be that pronounced of holding the microphone and doing that. It just, they would probably, there's certain things like I'm surprised the mic didn't go live at the wrong time and they're having a conversation that rings, like not on ECW, but anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, man, this match sucks. And it's just all throughout. And then they chant, this match sucks. This match sucks.
Did you? I'm sure I've been to like shows from years ago, and it sounded like the ring was so loud. So I always presumed that the ring was mic'd up somehow to the arena speakers, but I don't know if it's changed over the years.
There were instances, I think, in WWF sometimes on a tape show, that they would mic the crowd by just dropping the microphone, like, have mics somewhere. That could be an urban legend, but I can believe that we just need to, like, there's certain times, okay, when you're filming something or when I go to the beach for a workout, I will film and have a shotgun mic and get tone for the room, I believe they call it, right? You get room tone for the beach or for in here, and you can underlie that track, that audio track, and bring it down and then have noise cancellation on it, and you can control the level of the ambience in the crowd or in the room. I believe that to be a real production trick.
Will that be interstitial, or is that only for music? Or can you have like interstitial sort of background noise as well?
Well, that would be more for a live type of thing, right? Live performances, which would be in line with wrestling. I don't know the exact thing. I know room tone because I do that sometimes with the gym, or if I don't want to completely cut out the ambient sound in the background.
So let's get to the show itself. We left off with Rob Van Dam and Lance Storm, and we are picking up with BWO Japan, which I believe is the only appearance of BWO Japan in ECW. This is Dick Togo, Terry Boy, or Men's Teo, and Taka Michinoku. And I want to bring to your attention also that all three of these guys are still working regularly as well. And this is 28 years ago. Goodness me. I think, is it? 97?
Yeah.
Goodness me.
28.
28 years ago, and they're facing Gran Hamada, who just passed away a few days ago, Great Sasuke, and some guy that I wrote in the notes originally in a green Robin Hood dress-up costume, who I believe the name is Yaku Shija, or Shiji, who isn't that big of a deal, I guess, because he didn't even have his own Wikipedia page when I tried to look him up, I suppose.
They just call him the Green Arrow from now on.
That's fine. What do you think of this? It's one of those things where I'll just give my opinion very quickly, is high-flying matches don't age as well as a good fundamentals match because high-flying constantly evolves.
This felt, I think you're right on with that and correct, because when I watched it back before we did part one of the Barely Legal episodes, by the way, if we held out for a couple more months, we could have did it on the anniversary. Like exactly 28 years later, but we were putting this off for a while. It felt extremely, pun intended, overbooked. Like, I thought this has to be the finish. This has to be the finish. Like, when I'm looking back, I'm like, it really felt like we talked about Dakota Kai and Ivy Nile. It felt like a really like extended version of something like that, much more extended. And I was very like, I thought the Japanese BWO went over. I was shocked to, and obviously Sasuke, Amada, and the Green Arrow, especially Sasuke and Amada, were veterans. So obviously they put them over like that. But it didn't feel, and there was some odd thing at the finish too, where it was over, but it wasn't over. Did you notice that?
Yeah, but at the time, though...
There was aftermath to it. It was weird.
But at the time, though, this was like really revolutionary kind of stuff. I mean, this was basically Dave Meltzer, wet your khakis, 5-star kind of affair, where it's just move after move after move. And it's one of those kinds of matches that people on the indies will have seen and then tried to emulate at the time. It seems like almost like a proto-indie match in that sense.
Yeah, but I would dare say, if you're looking at this, something that had the pacing of that, or many matches that had pacing of that in ECW, were Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis. Also, I think Rey wrestled Juventud, or Psychosis wrestled Juventud. We had a lot of lucha matches, the stuff Conan did in ECW, and dare I say, probably the most famous example of a match or many matches that hold up today with high pace mixed with wrestling. You know where I'm going. The Guerrero-Malenko Classic, or the Malenko-Guerrero Classic, 3 matches, right? Mm-hmm. These guys were moving the entire time. These guys and the Luchadors, they birthed the Cruiserweight division in WCW and were brought there for Nitro. So by the time this happened, they were all wrestling in WCW. I believe that holds up a lot better, has every bit the pacing than this, which was just basically, what was it, your standard Japanese match with all the big move, schoolboy for the finish type thing.
I'm going to give you a few, just because you asked, who Ray wrestled in ECW. Psychosis, of course, a few times. I didn't realize La Parka was in ECW. I love La Parka. Ray wrestled Mikey Whipwreck. He, Psychosis again, a tag match 911 and Rey Mysterio versus the Eliminators, and then 3 matches with Juventud. I didn't think he wrestled that much for ECW. Turns out I was wrong.
He did. He came in, I think they came in 95, and this was right along the way of Malenko and Guerrero having the classic, having those matches. I'm thinking back. Now, I'm not saying anything in this 6-man had a lot of energy, a lot of action. Like you said, the fans live and on pay-per-view, casuals and hardcore fans alike, were exposed to this type of wrestling without having to get a VHS tape. So it was very much something new. But like you said, you look at it 28 years later and you're like, the Ray matches, the Malenko, the Guerreros, all that stuff mixed together, man, you look back at that and it holds up today much better than this 6-man does.
Yeah, I think that's probably why Rey Mysterio is probably the greatest luchador of all time, because I guess everything made sense more than it's not moves for moves' sake, which I think you were describing in the previous segment with Dakota Kai, in fact.
Plus, it helps with Ray being a likable guy as a real person. He's small. He's an underdog. He's like a Tommy Dreamer that can do a million more moves. He has all the elements of that baby face, but he'll wow you with everything else as well. But he could sell with a mask on, by the way. He could sell and register and convey emotion without you seeing any of this. That's why he's the greatest.
Sasuke pins Taka with a Tiger Suplex, and these guys would basically form the basis of what would become the WWF light heavyweight division. First Great Sasuke, I don't know how many people remember this back in the day. Taka was the light heavyweight champion and the person they were building around, but it was actually originally going to be Great Sasuke. And then, Taka would feud with Brian Christopher and that kind of thing. The wrestlers actually met with Jim Ross soon after to discuss Michinoku Pro working with the WWF on an ongoing basis. And one more thing about this is Paul Heyman reportedly paid all 6 wrestlers and the referee $20,000 all in for the appearance. So I sort of like how it's almost like it was big money at the time for most people in ECW as well. I like how that match was a package deal. You bought that attraction, essentially. You got your 20 minutes and you filled up a bit of the card.
It's a good way to go. You think about it, and you guys figure out how you're going to split it up. Who got screwed over on that $20,000 deal? I know you're going to ask me about my pay. It was not 20 grand or anywhere near it. I want to say this too with Sasuke. I have a question. Did you tell me, or did someone show me a video of like Sasuke shooting on somebody? There was like, dude, we go back to these Japanese matches like that we talk about where someone got shot on. I think Sasuke beat somebody up, or am I thinking about another masked wrestler over in Japan?
There you go. When pro wrestling turns into a shoot, Volume 1, The Great Sasuke versus the Dirt Bike Kid.
Dirt Bike Kid. Oh, that's a watch along.
Okay, right. I'm writing it down. Dirt Bike Kid.
But you brought that up to me. I could have swore you brought that up to me.
Not me. I don't think so.
On a previous episode, somebody talked about Sasuke and the Dirt Bike Kid, and I was like, wow. You know what it was? I think it was part of one of our botch watches. The Indie Botch Watch. I think it was one of those.
No, don't remember it. Well, there you go. So Patreon or whatever it is for a botch watch in the future. Stevie Richards black and white backstage vignette in Raven style. I actually wrote Raven style as well. Talking about tonight's match. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to really screw over the show viewers here by saying that we went into far more depth on Patreon. But for people who haven't seen it, give us a short version of what was said in the pay-per-view, in that promo.
Well, this promo seems to be something that people look at favorably, and they think it's a really great promo. And the reason why, number one, is because Paul Heyman produced it. He produced it, and he gave me the guidance. There was no script. You thought I was looking down at the lines. This was not scripted. Nothing in ECW, like word for word, was scripted. It was Paul giving you direction, some bullet points. The direction, the production, and the coaching that Paul gave me was, you're becoming a man. This is your basically going from a kid, from a boy, from a lackey, from everything in your childhood, which Paul was aware that I had a pretty rough childhood. I was picked on. I was a pretty passive kid, pretty shy, introverted, picked last to play kickball, picked last in sports, never really good at much. I was a pretty smart kid, but I couldn't convey it. I didn't have the confidence to put myself out there. So this promo was speaking about all that. Also, what this promo did was it protected me from doing the job, because I never said once I was going to win the title. But I said this was my opportunity to become a man. This was my opportunity to not be a lackey anymore, to not stand in Raven's shadow. This was about Stevie Richards, not Big Stevie Cole, the BWO, but me as a man, as a human being, getting my respect. And that's all I needed. It was the Rocky thing. If I can go to distance with Sandman and Terry Funk, if I can just survive out there, then I win. I didn't say that, but that was the theme of the promo, and I think it came across very well. But it would not have come across that well without Meanie being a part of it, without Paul producing it, without Paul getting to know me as a person, and then using that life experience in the promo, because I sure as hell didn't think of it. Paul told me this is what you need to get across. Now, I delivered it, but it would have never got delivered if he wasn't there to guide me through everything.
Now to our next match. And I know I've talked about this with Shane Douglas himself. I can't, for the life of me, I think it's one of the first episodes on Franchise University. If you want to hunt that out, that we talk about it. But for whatever reason, Shane Douglas, who is the ECW television champion, versus Pitbull number 2, Anthony Durant. Why didn't it work? I mean, this has been built up for months and months, especially with the... We'll talk about, in fact, actually, before we even get to the match first, should we talk about what's leading up to this then? So we're actually saying...
Oh, it's the most important part, and why it fell flat.
Yeah.
Why it's a mystery that it fell flat, because... Tell everybody what happened, because you can't get any more real than that.
Okay, then, so we'll get to the match later. Why don't we talk about the build-up to the match, and most importantly, Shane Douglas versus Gary Wolfe, Pitbull number 1. There was an in-ring incident, a serious botch that happens, and it results in Gary Wolfe's neck being broken. So, for starters, what was the move then? You remember?
It was like a divorce court arm breaker, but Gary's head went into the belt, I believe. His head hit the ECW belt, and it broke his neck. A story that Gary told, and I'm paraphrasing it, I don't know it chronologically completely. Gary was feeling pain in his neck and mostly his neck, but he was stiff. What do you do as a wrestler when you have a stiff back or neck? You go to the chiropractor, right? You go to the doctor. I believe the chiropractor had said to him before, because you're like, man, you got to adjust this. Just, it's stiff or it hurts or whatever. The chiropractor did an x-ray, did some tests, did some film, whatever he did, definitely an x-ray, I believe, and found out then he had the broken neck. So the chiropractor being very wary and saying, before I do the adjustment, which could have done irreparable damage to Gary, could have paralyzed him, could have done a lot more harm than good. They did that, and I believe Gary had to go right to the hospital and basically get scheduled. If not, they put him in the hospital, and he had the neck surgery and had the halo put on. He was very dangerously close, and it was so high on his neck that if he did that adjustment, it would have been pretty bad. So what happened was, I'm just going to give I believe it was the arm breaker, and Gary came down and he hit his head in a way that broke his neck, landing on the belt.
Now, I think the backstory to that is that Shane and Gary were both arguing about whether this move was safe to take. And I know Shane and Gary have got differing opinions on what actually happened beforehand and, their chats beforehand. Shane says that he tried to discourage, doing the DDT or this arm breaker, kind of like whatever it was, he landed on the belt. Just basically trying to discourage Gary from taking it this way, because Shane said you can't do it this way because you'll end up getting hurt, and then Gary ends up getting hurt, of course. Now, he ends up with the halo. Do you remember the night where Gary in the halo and then Shane are in the ring, and then Shane yanks on the halo? Because the way Shane says it, that was the most dangerous, the most threatened he felt from the fans he ever felt in his entire career was after doing that. Like, they were ready to lynch him.
Yeah. I mean, that's the understatement of the entire wrestling and industry, because I was backstage, and from backstage, now these are ECW fans, pretty desensitized. Violence is like, whatever, give us more. We're bloodthirsty. The fans are pretty rough and pretty hard-nosed. It takes a lot for the fans to care in a way, you know what I mean? Or be like, that's a bridge too far. That's a line crossed. I was backstage, and when he did that, I don't know how many people were in the audience. Let's say 1,000 people in the arena. It was such a loud, collective gasp. The air came out of the building, and we were in that legendary Memphis white heat territory, the heat you don't want. Shane is not exaggerating. I think Shane had to be kind of snuck out of the building after. I don't know if he just grabbed his stuff and left. I know he sure as hell wasn't hanging around to see hey, what did you guys think of the spot? You know what I mean? He was out of there. Dude, we gasped. Just to grab this thing back and forth, he was trying to work it, but he still had to move the guy, you know what I mean? And Gary just kind of collapsed and crumbled, which he had to do. Shane is not exaggerating. If you ever get a chance to interview Gary might not have heard it as much as Shane, but that was it was right up there with how can I say it? Not up there. It was way above, but I'm saying, if you're talking about the crucifixion angle, where people are kind of like, what is this? Way worse than that. It was kind of that chaotic type of feeling while it was quiet that I can only use the analogy of when the fire went out into the crowd with Terry and Cactus. But it was the worst kind of heat that I ever felt in a building that was truly scary. I wasn't even a part of it. I'm like, dude, what are these fans going to do? You're saying, and I'm in the locker room. So Shane trying to find a path through the fans, which that entryway is not a WWE ramp. you're going through to where they can get you. And nobody did weapons checks or any of that stuff. So I say once again, Shane is not exaggerating or writing revisionist history on that incident. It was every bit as scary, bad, and off-putting as Shane would say.
Did you have to wrestle in front of the fans afterwards?
Yeah, I think that wasn't the last thing. That was not we taped for TV. So like, I don't know what the interval was, like once a month, once every 3 weeks. This was not the finish of the show. Should have been.
With ECW, I guess, I mean, with Pitbull, with stuff like, Sandman being blinded for a month, there were still times where they wouldn't lie to the fans, or if they did lie to the fans, they went all the way. They wouldn't, give a nod and a wink with these kind of things. In a sense, are the ECW fans the easiest to work?
Well, yeah. I mean, they can work. I mean, the boys can work themselves into a shoot too. But the ECW fans were the easiest to work. If you're a Raven or a Paul Heyman or a Shane Douglas, and you understand it from a territorial level, and you've been everywhere, and you have that perspective of, yeah, these are these types of fans, so let's work them this way. But if you're somebody like me or anybody at the time that didn't have all the different looks of different crowds to work, then I would say they were extremely hard to work, because you have to work them according to your knowledge, not according to theirs.
Why was this too far for them?
I have no idea. Like, that's the mystery, right? Like, they could act like this might have been just because Gary and Anthony, Pitbull 1 and Pitbull 2, lived in South Philly. Everybody knew them. They knew Gary wasn't working because he wore the halo. Now, if he was walking around and like Sandman worked the fans by acting like he was blind for a month, but he could take the bandages off when he went home or did whatever. Gary legitimately had his neck broken, people saw him on the street, saw him going to the doctor, saw him in the checkups, saw him struggling, maybe saw him going to physical therapy. So that might have been, they were much more emotionally invested because Gary literally lived in the neighborhood and they got to see him. Same thing, me as a heel, they were like, we know where this guy lives. We can get him.
I think one more thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and we should, was just how good Shane Douglas was at antagonizing the fans, and not in, I guess, not even in a working sense. They're not playing along. I mean, some people really hated Shane, and he did so well in ECW. And he's such a, it sounds like in a derogatory sense, I just can't think of the right word for it, but he's such a cheerleader for ECW still. It's his favorite time in the business by far. And, he's a proponent of ECW. But why was Shane so great at getting under the fans' skin, but not to a point that he was like driving them away, to the point that he wanted to see him get beaten up?
Well, it's what I said before. Shane has the experience of working territories, working for different companies, and he used that knowledge and that psychology, which, dare I say, you say Shane was great. Shane's still great. Whatever physical things or difficulties he might have, I think he still wrestles sometimes. Shane's every bit as great as he was back then. So whatever physical ailments or injuries or things he's fighting as we all age, up here in the way Shane talks and what he can do in the ring, still one of the best. The reason why Shane looks at ECW and he's the number one cheerleader or proponent for ECW, because it was an example, a shining example that exposed every other company for their BS politics and not doing business the right way, because the ECW truly gave you an opportunity. I'm a case for that too. An opportunity to succeed or fail. And Shane proved he was one of the greatest to ever do it because he was given the opportunity. Now, in a wide lens, a large body of work in fake subjective professional wrestling, Shane's not going to be considered to be one of the best. You know why? Because he wasn't given an opportunity to be the best. He was given the opportunity to be as good as he can be or as great as he can be in ECW, and he knocked it out of the ballpark. Shane could have drew money for each and every company, even especially WCW. You talk crap about Ric Flair for years, and then Ric Flair doesn't want to do business or make money with you. Think about that.
They did wrestle in
Flair
WCW.
could have been over his.
What's that? They actually did wrestle in WCW in the.
But not to the point where they should have.
No. I mean, in the match that I remember, it was in 2000 at a pay-per-view that no one was buying the pay-per-views, and Ric Flair was wrestling in trousers and a black T-shirt at that point still. I mean, it wasn't the same. It was 5 years beyond where it should have been.
Shane Douglas, and it'll never happen. Not because, I work with the Black Widow, and so did he, Black Widow, James Romero. That's not...
Wearing black as well today.
Okay, there you go. He should be in the Hall of Fame. An instant first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's in the one up in New England. They have another one in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. But Shane should be in any wrestling Hall of Fame, especially the WWE Hall of Fame. He never will because of the politics of the company. But Shane has paid his dues. Shane has proved himself, and you cannot talk about ECW without mentioning Shane Douglas as one of the first 3 or 4 names. There was a time you couldn't talk about ECW, and Shane would be the first name you'd need to mention. So that's me I'm a cheerleader for Shane as much as he's a cheerleader for ECW.
He's in the Hardcore Hall of Fame, class of 2014.
The ECW arena, right?
Yeah.
But not the pro wrestling, and definitely not the WWE.
No.
Cauliflower Alley should give Shane his flowers as well.
So, that being said, we wax lyrical on Shane Douglas, but the fact is that for some reason when we go into Barely Legal, this is months after the Halo incident and Gary breaking his neck, and you would have thought that the fans were absolutely clamouring for it, but the match between Shane and Pitbull to Anthony, he isn't the guy who had his neck broken because Gary Wolf is sat at ringside, still in the Halo.
Anthony's the bald one. Gary has hair, Anthony's bald. Yeah. There you go.
All right, Pitbull bald, if we're going to do that. So like FTR bald, I suppose. So it's Shane Douglas versus Pitbull bald. Why didn't it work? Because you've got months channeling straight into this match, and just the fans just sit there just staring at it for the most part. They had, I'm trying to put this the right way because it's really interesting. It's intriguing. They had everything working for them to have that match you just described they could potentially have. But it was also the biggest hindrance of why the match didn't work. You know why? Because it was a wrestling match. After everything that happened, and you literally took a guy who you legitimately broke his neck in the ring, and you did this. And now we're whipping them off the ropes and press slamming them and clotheslining them. This should have been a match that had every bit the violence. The violence that matched what happened to Gary. There should have been. I was looking at this in retrospect 28 years later, and I'm like, should there have been a stipulation in this match that may have made them more interested, that the only way to win this match is to break your opponent's neck? And Pitbull, too, repeatedly apologized Shane Douglas to where he's stretchered out and he's off TV for 3 months with a broken neck. That's just the way I'm thinking now. At the time, you think this is a slam dunk. You could literally put him in a headlock for 20 minutes and the fans are going to be calling for blood. But that's what I mean. You took a real act of violence, a real potentially life-threatening injury, and you had a wrestling match. That's where I feel like the disconnect was. There should have been some stipulation. There should have been some stakes. There should have been it should have been the bloodiest match on the card, by far. Those elements would have made. What would Shane say? I'm sure you've asked him that. What did he feel was missing? I can't remember because he told me. And for some reason, I didn't go back and watch.
Dude, I'm the one that got hit with all the chairs. What's going on with you?
Look, right. I do so many of these. I can't remember any of the answers I'm given anymore. I'm terrible. We don't know. Here's the thing, though. You could tell that the match was cooling off somewhat, and then they bring the guardrail in, and then they both mess up on the guardrail. I think at one point when they're doing the atomic drop, and I think from that point the audience just has absolutely no time for the match, so it just goes ugh. And I find it weird that the audience had no patience for it, whether they still just hated Shane so much they didn't want to see him at that point, or what.
Well, if they hate some, they've done a thing where they've had matches where the match sucks or they hated somebody so much, the people would turn their backs.
With Shane, in fact, with Tully Blanchard.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. They didn't do that in this match. They watched, but they sat on their hands and folded their arms. And Taz got so mad when they did that. No, I'm just kidding. Brother.
You get me with me drinking water at the same time.
That's why I did it.
Shane Douglas wins clean via pinfall, in fact, here as well. The crowd are really reacting weirdly. Once again, it's just...
Did Vince McMahon book this finish?
Well...
Evil wins again.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, yeah, Shane wins clean again. I'll tell you what, though, Shane, no matter how injured he got, boy, he kept winning in 97 and 98. Even when, with that one with Al Snow, and he's got like a cleft palate.
The one-armed man beat the Fugitive.
Yeah, it's like you just couldn't kill the guy.
I do want to say this. Now, you're saying, why would Shane go over after all this? Why would Evil prosper after Evil tried to kill one of the Pitbulls? The Pitbulls had a very interesting relationship, much like Axel and Ian Rotten with Paul Heyman. It was very much a love-hate relationship. And I feel like the finish of this match, and Shane was like Paul's number one guy. So this could be a political booking right here as far as the finish. That's my guess. Because it doesn't make sense. It should have been the feel-good moment, right?
Mm. Oh, but maybe, yeah, but it's ending on a feel-good moment, so maybe that's why they thought,
But that's Paulie's way of still getting the Pitbulls to not be so mad because we need to do this afterwards.
Yeah. One more thing is there's a storyline happening with Rick Rude. So Shane is being brought to the ring by several security guards in helmets. If that sounds familiar, it's been done in WCW and WWE since. But I've got it written down here. So Rick Rude turns out to be one of the guys under the helmet in the security. But someone in a mask walks out in Rick Rude's robe and then kisses Francine. It turns out to be Brian Lee. Or very briefly, his nickname was Bulldozer Brian Lee, which I'd totally forgotten about as well. But then it's exposed Brian Lee, and then it turns out it's Rick Rude in the security helmet.
You got to give credit to Brian Lee because he walked just like Rude down to the ring, didn't he?
Yeah, oh yeah. With that being said, I know you and Rick were only in the company maybe a few months before you left, and he would stay for the remainder of 97 or most of 97. I thought Rick Rude in ECW was amazing. He was one of the unsung heroes of ECW in 1997 because every single segment he was in was just an absolute slam dunk. He was brilliant. That being said, I've also written that he looks more like Don Fry than Don Fry in this episode as well. But I don't know how much time you spent with Rick Rude, but what were your impressions of him as a professional and as a person at this time?
Well, I had very brief dealings with Rick Rude. I remember Revere, the Greyhound track where the mass transit incident happened. We had a little bit of a talk, and he gave me some advice that I wasn't even smart enough or mature or experienced enough to understand until years later. Really cool stuff when that happens, when the aha moment later on that somebody gave you a little something that didn't mean much.
What was it?
But
what was it? What was the advice?
It was something about slowing down, but it wasn't the old... slow down, kid, bring it down, cut your... The way Rick put it, like, when you do that, he put it like making the moves mean something, but he was a guy that didn't have many words as far as like we do here. We kind of go off on tangents and stuff like that. But whatever he said meant something, and that's what the analogy I was going to say was the one exception. There's two exceptions. Joel Gertner did a great job. Don Callis was okay with Joey. Rick Rude with Joey was really, really good. Joey didn't need Rick, but Rick, he wasn't the color commentator. He wasn't just, what's the word with Philly accent? He wasn't a color commentator. He wasn't an accessory to Joey. They both stood out individually as commentating on what they saw. I can't quite put my finger on it.
He was more like an
awesome.
Analyst than a color commentator.
Like if there was a telestrator back then, Rick would be using it. It would be awesome. Rick was the reason why I got over as Big Stevie Cole on commentary, the way he commentated. Joey saying it is one thing. Rick Rude saying, this guy's going to be a star. This guy's going to win the world title. This guy's giving Terry Funk a run for his money. When one of the boys, who's a Rick Rude, is saying, man, this guy's going to win, the fans are like, I think he has a chance. If Rick sees it, then I see it. Very underrated. And I wish I had more time to talk to Rick Rude. And man, even though you said he had the Lloyd's of London insurance policy, to get to wrestle Rick Rude would have been amazing. My God. I would have been scared too, at the same time.
I don't know if you know this, but Rick Rude did commentary in WCW, but only for like the online broadcasts. Can you believe that they dumped him there?
I do not. Was that when they were doing house show broadcasts over the radio?
Yeah, they would. WCW doing some really innovative things on like internet broadcasts and stuff like that in the 90s that most people forget. But yeah, Rick Rude was doing some online commentary. Maybe
do you remember they had the radio show, the live radio for the house shows?
WWF had that in the early 90s, in fact, as well.
That was on Westwood One. They had Stan Lane. Raven was a part of that show sometimes. That was Disco Inferno's birth that he would call into that show on Westwood One.
Now, I actually do want to mention that. You mentioned the Lloyd's of London insurance policy. We won't go, I mean, that's its own story for another time, really. But were you aware that Rick Rude could not, unless he stopped getting paid by Lloyd's of London, could not fully wrestle or take bumps at that time?
I never asked him. I mean, he's an intimidating guy. You know, he turned out to be a nice guy when I did talk to him, but he's a pretty intimidating guy to approach if you're not sure. But I didn't know, but I kind of knew. I'm like, why is he not wrestling? And maybe somebody clued me in that his back injury. Was this the same back injury that he suffered in Japan against Sting by hitting his upper neck against that platform?
Yeah, he never wrestled. He did so much, like he did anything but wrestle in WCW and ECW though as well. He was desperate to get back in the ring.
But he's a draw. No matter what Rick did, even carrying a suitcase for Degeneration X and then being on Nitro and Raw at the same exact time, that was a big deal. Did they put him in the Hall of Fame, or they still have that against him?
No. He's in the Hall of Fame. His son inducted him, and his son, if you thought Rick Rude was big, his son's massive. He's like 7 foot or something. His son's huge.
Wow. Well, good for him. He deserves it. I just thought that was the one thing that rubbed Vince the wrong way during the Monday Night Wars. And I would think he would be persona non grata. So, yeah, put Shane in there. My goodness, don't be mad at Shane.
And then we go to Taz. Sabu, the time for talking is done. And Bill Alfonso names everyone Taz choked out, including Chris Jericho, Too Cold Scorpio, Paul Varlins, which its own story in a future episode.
Oh, man, that's something else, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Take a drink. Rob Van Dam, he names as well. And then it is the grudge match of the century. Taz versus Sabu. Should we talk about the match first, and what were your impressions of it? Because this was building for... People don't realise this was building for a year at this point.
This was the best build that ECW and a lot of companies have ever done. This ranks right up there. What an amazing build. The only build I can think of that kind of came out of nowhere, wasn't some WWE WrestleMania type thing, was Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. That's what this had, the big fight. This is the big fight feel. We talk about the main event, semi-main, or what we're doing. This was a big fight feel with as much reality. And that's what Barely Legal. You have to say, there were so many reality-based angles, reality-based characters, reality-based builds to this. We couldn't really match it after this. There was so much a perfect storm of everything. And nothing encapsulates big fight or real-world build-up more than Taz versus Sabu. And this is based on what we talked about last week, or before too. Sabu taking bookings in Japan, Paul saying Sabu no-showed, apologizing, burying Sabu, then Taz burying Sabu, and then Sabu finally coming back with the lights off, lights on, where they never touched. Because didn't the lights go off again?
I know that Sabu returned in November to Remember 95 So, I mean, that's 18 months between Sabu returning and then Taz and Sabu finally having a match.
And the people were not tired if they wanted it. It wasn't like maybe today it wouldn't work with everybody with their short attention span. But back then, I can't think of anybody saying, just have the damn match already. But today they might have. They might have not had an 18-month build. My guess is they wouldn't. It's because the crowd would not allow it.
It's the what if. You don't really get it anymore because you see everyone wrestle everyone. But like back then, it's like, what if A wrestle B? And then you got really excited over it for, months on end. But yeah, Taz and Sabu was an incredibly long build. We're going to talk about the end of the match, obviously at the end of when we talk about the match. But the actual physicality within the match, anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, a perfect blend. You said it in the show notes. A perfect blend of crowd-pleasing brawls, suplexes, aerial stuff. This match delivered. And this is one of those things that when you look back at it, obviously Terry Funk, if Terry Funk was not winning the world title that night, dare I say it, this match might have had to go on last. It had the most amount of build, the most amount of intrigue, the most amount of anticipation, and two guys that haven't touched in 18 months. How do you top that? What do you follow that with? Except Terry Funk finally winning the world title.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it lived up to expectations, or do you think ECW fans specifically, because Paul Heyman was obviously a master at building two matches, did he ever get to the point where you build up a match so much that you cannot possibly live up to expectations? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think that's the example of the amount of build, maybe not the amount of time, but how it was built up between Shane Douglas and the Pitbulls. That's where it falls flat. This here, Paul was smart enough to give them just enough each and every week, but not too much. I don't think every single week Taz and Sabu were mentioned on the buildup. They would revisit it. So the 18 months may have been 10 months of build off and on. You know what I mean? Because we had that Sabu not being able to respond, not being able to face Taz for how many months after the supposed no-show.
Well, with Taz as well, we're talking am I right in saying that when Taz returned, because he had a broken neck, obviously, as well, I mean, there was a spate of broken necks at one point in ECW, but I'm just looking when he actually came back to wrestling, and God, he was wrestling in the end of 95 as well, so I guess that they both sort of returned around the same time, so it almost made sense. And who the heck is the Shark Attack Kid? Just looking at Taz's...
I remember the Shark Attack Kid. It's not Shark Boy. It's somebody else, I think.
There you go. Yeah, so they were sort of like back in the ring at the same time as well. So, yeah.
Well, the thing, too, is Taz, with that neck injury, he started to get... that was a spike pile driver off the second with Malenko and Scorpio, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Taz had to cut a promo, and then he had managed the Steiners. I remember that because the Steiners... wrestled myself and Raven in New York somewhere, and Taz was at ringside. But then Taz started to morph into heel Taz with the human suplex machine. What was the saying? Beat me if you can, survive if I let you. So Paul was able to turn his neck injury into one of the most over gimmicks and merch sellers in ECW history. Something in wrestling they don't do today. They never, if somebody gets hurt in wrestling, what do? Disappear. Charlotte Flair disappeared and then came back, not with vignettes or training or anything, but right away just wins the Royal Rumble. Doesn't make sense. But no, this match lived up. It lived up to all the anticipation, the expectations, and also had a finish. All right, let me back up. The boys in the back and the fans, we were asking the question that every wrestler wants when they go into a match. We don't know who's going to win. Who's going to do the job? That's what made this finish beautiful, too, because nobody expected Taz to go over clean with the Taz mission.
I was going to ask you, what do you think about that? A clean
I think it was great.
Yeah.
I think it was great. I think if you gave them anything else, you might have turned the people on Sabu, because Sabu did have a reputation of protecting his gimmick and not doing jobs. Not saying he wouldn't do jobs, but you know what I mean? He had to stay strong. The Sheik was famous for never losing. So that thing about keeping your gimmick strong was right there. So for Sabu to put somebody over clean, especially Taz, who was talking so much crap about him, I thought it was great.
When we talk about the post-match shenanigans then, so I thought it was so clever to almost, I bet a lot of people, when you ask, long-time wrestling fans who won, Taz or Sabu, they probably wouldn't even remember. They know the match happened and where it happened. But because of the post-match shenanigans with Bill Alfonso dumping Taz for Rob Van Dam and Sabu, man, it was a great way to blow off one story and then immediately go into the next one, so there's no downtime. The intrigue remains at a constant level or ramps up, and I thought that was really wonderful writing, scripting, booking, however you want to call it.
Well, this is the classic case of every match. One guy goes over, one guy gets over. It's exactly what happened. And this may have been the only reason that Sabu puts Taz over clean, because he knew he was getting over right away. He was getting his stuff in like right away after that. And dare I say it, if everything didn't happen, it's funny when you look back, Sabu leaving or going to Japan, Barley burying him, Taz burying him, becoming one of the biggest heels in the company, leading up to this, and then one of the most over tag teams in ECW history, Sabu and Rob Van Dam with Fonzie. Dude, look at how much stuff spun off of the reality of Sabu just not coming to the ECW and going to do a show in Japan. Gold, money, right off the bat. And everybody played their part perfectly in all aspects of this.
Okay, then. So I've got to ask this one. The not only the professional rivalry, but apparently there was a personal rivalry as well between Taz and Sabu. Do you know anything about the reasoning behind it?
I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I know you're saying in notes here, Taz was very, very serious. He was a serious person, very uptight, and he took everything seriously when it came to his gimmick, his brand, his character, and he should. But then he took a lot of stuff way, way too seriously, and he would definitely admit that. I would give Taz credit because Taz cared. He wasn't like, whatever, I don't care, well, it doesn't matter. I give him credit for that. And that's me looking at it in hindsight at the time, being a young guy, being on his radar and his crosshairs from time to time. I didn't appreciate that then, but I realized that Taz took it seriously and believed in himself and believed in ECW and had a lot of responsibility outside of just being a wrestler. He ran the school. He ran merch. He did a lot of art for the merchandise, I believe, as well, for his. So he had a lot of responsibility, and this was his way. He didn't know if he was ever going to go to WWE or WCW or any other company in the future. So I appreciate that. But you asked the question in notes, were you ever told you were banned wearing orange? Not really, because everybody had their color scheme, but they understood. Then it became a joke, the orange and black and all that stuff and everything. Taz did mellow out enormously. I have a great Taz story, actually, in WWE.
Please.
And this was my this is a Perry Saturn thing. So, Perry, you can disagree with me when I put you over again. I'm going to keep that going. I was walking into the building on a SmackDown taping, I believe, because Taz was a commentator. And I walked by his rental car, and I didn't know it was his rental car, but I saw somebody playing PSP or PS Vita, whatever at the time, and playing Madden because the screen was really bright and it was dark in there. And I looked, and it was Taz playing Madden. I was like, dude. And I looked at it because, I never knew he played video games. And he paused it, rolled the window down. And he goes, hey, what's up, Stevie? I go, dude, are you playing video games? He goes, of course. What else am I going to do? Got all this time. And I remember that. I was like, oh, cool. And that was the indication that Taz had, But I give him credit, man. I wish more people would take there's happy mediums, but I wish more people would take their gimmick, their brand, their character, and the business more seriously in the direction that Taz did. Because I get it now.
Next on the show, Joey Styles announces that Tommy Dreamer is the guest color commentator. He has given up his spot,
Your
as you
favorite.
said earlier. The worst color commentator of all time. I mean, he was a deaf mute for most of it. And he's like, I can't talk. I'm too into the match. Which, in fairness, is actually quite real. But
I want to talk about how Dreamer is charismatic. We used to call him. There's nicknames I had for him in WWE. Eeyore was one of them from Winnie the Pooh, and the other was Dream Smasher. Because I would be like all excited because you get a taste of this. Everybody on Patreon, Chris and James especially, you get a taste of when I say, dude, I got a great idea. And I'd start getting all excited and everything. And you're my modern day 2025 Tommy Dreamer, because we used to call him Dream Smasher. Because I would say, oh man, we could do this and that and the other thing. He goes, did you know? And he'd walk by and he'd give the devil's advocate thing that would make everybody go, oh. Did you know? So that's Dreamer. Very monotone, very Eeyore, Dream Smasher. And this is what you get on commentary. That's a trash can wrapped in steel, Joe.
dazzling he was on commentary on this. But the big point is and
I'm gonna add Tommy Dreamer sound clips from commentary into the smart pads.
You will not need a lot of memory for that. He maybe says like two things through the entire deal. Ah, dear. Anyway,
we love you, Tommy.
It's sort
we
of
love you.
I mean, we've already talked about the match for 25-30 minutes on the Patreon, so this is going to be sort of the very much abbreviated version of it. So, but if you want to watch Stevie actually do far more commentary over the match than Tommy Dreamer does and explain everything that happens in the match, I do completely encourage you to join the Patreon and watch it because it's very illuminating. Terry Funk's current health. What was it at this point? Was he just absolutely destroyed? Because we talked about Beyond the Mat last week because they were actually at the show filming, and then part of the documentary is following Terry Funk to the doctors, and they focus on the good knee first and basically say it's destroyed. Then they focus on the bad knee and it's completely gone. You know, I mean, just how injured, how racked with injuries, how much in pain was Terry Funk on a day-to-day basis at that time in his career?
Well, you can never tell. He wouldn't sell it. I mean, obviously he was moving a little slower. He's limping. He's 53 years old, which we're reacting on the watch along. And I'm saying, I'm 53 years old. And I'm looking at Terry, but he's worked so much harder. And he's been, at this point, around the world 120 times and wrestled like shoot style, strong style, every style you can think of. But your adrenaline gets pumping. I'm sure Terry, when he was hurt. And when he got to the building and it came time to put all the physical ailments, the pain aside, and just do the damn thing, he was there. He never sold as far as and he never said, watch my knee, watch my neck, be careful of this. Obviously, he didn't tell Sandman because Sandman was just like, woof, there you go. Here's a ladder. Here's a trash can wrapped in steel, Joe. You love that line.
Patreon for everybody who doesn't know what's going on there.
Terry is a real one. Terry is a man's man, and he did not show. I dare say myself and Sandman were displaying more of our injuries over the past weeks and months more than Terry. And when he got out there, well, you watched it, and we watched it on Patreon, but everybody has seen it who hopefully follows our show. He's Superman. And the funny thing is, how many years did he wrestle after this? If he was already destroyed before this match.
2016, I think, was his last match, and he was like over 70. And then Dory Funk has just wrestled last year. Was it last year? I think it was last year. And he's 80 something. So. I mean, I saw a few clips.
81. I think he's 81 or something, isn't he?
Yeah, he was at least 80 when he wrestled.
I was in Ocala a few months ago. I'm in Florida, so we went to Ocala. And we went to the Olive Garden because, you know, I'm high class like that. Go to the Olive Garden for the free breadsticks and salad. But on the way out, Dory was there getting takeout, him and his wife. And we made eye contact. I couldn't believe it was him. I don't think he even recognized me. And I just waved at him, and he waved back to me. He probably thought I was a fan and walked away. This was like, I think it was like a year ago, maybe 2 at the most. And just weird. I mean, but he's always been he's the Ozzy Osbourne of pro wrestling. If you ever seen Dory talk now, he has very much Ozzy Osbourne type tendencies. But when you talk about psychology or wrestling, it's like a Rain Man type thing, like a savant. Gets right into it and can talk. That's just based on my last experience having a conversation with Dory.
Let's get back to Terry, because I know you've wrestled Dory and Terry in ECW and Eastern Championship Wrestling back in the day. You lost via headlock.
And with a headlock, your favorite.
I love that match as well. Anyway, that's got to be a watch along for some other time. But Terry in ECW, very specifically Terry in ECW. One thing, actually, I don't think people realise that Terry Funk's actually a 2-time ECW champion. He was once Eastern champion. And I think that might have been a phantom title change because no one seems to know actually how he got it. But that,
no, well, maybe, but that was one of the best matches I saw too in Eastern, or no, was that Eastern or early Extreme, where it was Sabu, Terry Funk, Shane Douglas in the night the line was crossed.
Yeah, 1 hour. Was it a 1 hour draw?
Was it Eastern?
Oh, it's right on the cusp, isn't it?
Yeah. Because it was a title match, too, because Shane was Eastern Championship Wrestling Champion, I believe, or Sabu. One or the other.
It probably would have been Shane, because he was champion for over a year at that point. But Shane actually beat Terry Funk in March 26, 1994 at Ultimate Jeopardy. Terry Funk, title change aired... Oh, well, there you go. No, Terry Funk actually did beat Sabu for the ECW title in 93. So there you go. That's me misremembering. Or did he have...
Oh, that's where... It's that... Wait. I remember this. He beat Sabu. They went back to the hotel. It was supposedly a press conference or an interview with Terry. And that's when Shane busted into the press conference to challenge Terry.
Oh, is that where Shane says obliviatory?
I think so. Yeah, where it was like an over-the-shoulder shot of Shane interrupting Terry's press conference or interview.
It's not Ultimate Jeopardy, the three-way.
No, the night the line was crossed.
I'm sorry, the night the line was crossed. Okay, the night the line was crossed. This has got to be fascinating radio, whatever it is. However you listen, that's February 5th, 1994. So that would have been Terry. That would have been Terry as champion still.
That was a great match.
Now, with Terry, he was still champion at that time, but obviously Terry Funk and Eddie, I don't know if it's Eddie Gilbert or Paul Heyman, he has a relationship first with in Eastern Championship Wrestling. But how does he sort of like morph into the one legend that ECW keeps bringing back? Because they brought so many ex-WWF and WCW guys in 92 and 93 up to 94, I guess, as well. Jimmy Snuckers, Don Morocco, my man Don, Tito Santana, that kind of thing. What was it about Terry that he was willing to give back and that he saw the potential in Eastern Championship Wrestling to foster the next generation of stars?
It's just a gut feeling. He's been everywhere, so he saw a lot of potential with the roster, with the promotion, with the product. He wanted something maybe to succeed outside of WWF at the time and WCW. But on a personal level, I think it's more because of Dreamer. This is my speculation. He was a mentor to Tommy Dreamer, and that's why he was a recurring role in the company. It was Terry and Tommy versus myself and Raven. It was Terry and Tommy teaming up in other ways. It was Terry helping Tommy out, Tommy helping Terry out. They had a real, how should I say, as close to a real life father-son, mentor-protege relationship on screen. And this pay-per-view is the climax of that relationship as well, for Tommy to see that. You got to think, we're looking at Eastern and Extreme as if it's the same promotion with a different name. It took a detour off of what it was. It had splashes with Sabu and other people with the hardcore stuff. But like you said, why bother using a tag rope? You do everything. We went we put all our chips in and we were going to ride off that cliff together. And it ended up working.
What did Terry Funk personally teach you? I mean, you wrestled him quite a few times over the years as well. I mean,
never enough, though. Never enough.
No, I'm sure it could never be enough. But what specifically did you learn from Terry, I guess?
Well, I learned a lot from Raven psychology-wise. I'm trying to set the table here. I learned a lot from Raven psychology-wise on how to do certain things to prepare me to get in the ring with somebody like Terry Funk. I wrestled people like Cactus Jack. I wrestled people like, Tommy, obviously, Terry, people that came through, wrestled the Steiners once. This is all build up. Raven teaching me how to handle myself in the ring, protect myself, and not die in the ring, not literally, but not just get eaten up. So when I was in the ring with Terry conveyed the psychology, but also tested me throughout those months that we wrestled in a good way. I'm going to test you. Keep coming out. Don't give up. Hit me. Do this. Come on, get up. You know what I mean? Like he'd give me spots and ways to fire up in the ring. You know what I mean? Like, get up, you stupid son of a bitch. He was telling me to get up. Fight back, you stupid son of a bitch. I'd fight back. You know, he could call spots. But Terry, how should I say it? Terry instilled the confidence in me that I can handle myself in the ring. If something more physical than I was ready for happened, if something went south, if somebody was like Terry was a handful. He was hard to handle because he was middle-aged and crazy. That was his gimmick. That was his character. So of course his style is going to be unpredictable, physical, and sometimes downright like shoot fight. Not in the way to hurt you, but he helped me gain confidence and he helped me gain a mental, emotional, and physical toughness in the ring that I didn't have previous to that. They got me ready for this match as well. Sandman also prepared me for that, but in a way where you're just in a fight with Sandman and that's it.
It's like so you can survive Raven, you can survive anything.
That's why a lot of times in WWE I criticize them because the new people off NXT start at the top and then work their way down. My organic succeed or fail testing on my own, night in and night out, and mentoring from Raven, from Paul Heyman, coaching from Tommy Dreamer, from Terry Funk, pretty much being in real fights with the Sandman. They all prepared me for what I was on this pay-per-view.
I want to bring up just how sort of important Terry Funk is to wrestling beyond ECW and as a main eventer, as a star. And I think it might be lost on some people just how big of a draw Terry Funk was, not only in Japan, but in the US as well, and everywhere else that he went as well. Because it seemed that his full-time career was winding down just around the time of the national expansion. I mean, he was part of like the first or second Saturday Night's main event. I think he was main event in Hogan, maybe in the second one, or the third one, I don't remember. It was in 85, 86. And then he sort of winds it down a bit, and then he just becomes almost like a regional hit, with ECW and Smoky Mountain and wherever else he, appeared. But for people who never saw Terry Funk in his prime, how good was Terry as a performer, and how big of a draw was he?
Oh my God, I don't even know if I can put that in the words. People don't understand. And also, that Terry Funk was also somebody like we were talking about. Did he wrestle Lou Thesz? Did he wrestle? Terry is back in not only the shooter era, the hooker era of the truly dangerous guys that he wrestled. And let's not forget, second generation superstar. His dad was a wrestler, and of course his brother Dory. So Dory Funk Sr., Dory Funk Jr., and then you have Terry. And dare I say it, Terry was the one that could translate to an American WWE casual fan more than anybody because of the personality, crazy, unpredictable. He would do things that you would think if anybody else did it, like taking a bump and then doing the curly from the Three Stooges thing, you would think that was comedy. But for Terry, it was just like he's selling. It was so weird. It wouldn't fit anybody but Terry. A huge draw. Why would you put him on Saturday night's main event against Hogan? Probably because he was one of the top, most believable heels you could have.
Yeah, and apparently they'd had a big fight a couple of years earlier as well in Japan. Do you know what that was about?
Hogan told the story, but I don't know if that's true. There's a part of me that says Hogan might not be telling the truth.
Okay, it's probably not Hogan's version. I think this was Terry's version, or the version I heard that was more likely true.
Didn't he say he was going to kill him or something?
No, no. Apparently they had a match in like South Africa or something. This is like '83 maybe, and Terry said, "I'll lose. Just don't broadcast this, especially in Japan where wins and losses still meant a heck of a lot." So then apparently Hulk Hogan then went back to Japan and told everyone he'd beaten Terry Funk. And that's where Terry Funk got very upset and tried to kill him in a hotel room. But they never actually had the fight because Hogan wouldn't open the door, or he was in a different room, I forget. That's basically the story.
But what's Hogan's version? I think I heard Hogan tell the story, and it's much different than that.
I think maybe Terry Funk was on his knees saying, "Please don't beat me up, Hulk Hogan. You're far better than me." And so I don't know, something else. And then he slammed Andre.
And it was Terry's, and his biceps got torn. Yeah. I hope you're happy.
Yeah, he stitched him back up himself.
I think Terry got on his hands and knees in Africa and begged Hogan to pin him. I want to do the job. Poor Hogan. Not poor. Needs $2 million a year to live. So,
and he makes
but
it.
Getting back to Terry, we're being facetious about Hogan, but that's the Lord. Like, that's how believable Terry was, though, that like I could feel that Hogan feeling of fear for the three-way dance, even though Terry had literally been nothing but completely open and honest and like giving me compliments and wanting to work with me. And it was his idea to put me over on house shows leading up to this, to make me believable to win the title. These are the things that, Terry volunteered to do. So I think not only the drawing power, not only his poise, his presence, how Terry could be a main event draw anywhere as a heel, or in this case, as a babyface. I think Terry's humility and his willingness to give for the business, to the business, was his biggest strength and the reason why a lot of companies wanted to do business with Terry.
Well, that's the other thing, is that obviously wrestlers have to be, by their very nature, selfish. They don't. Whereas Terry Funk, he's almost in my opinion, looking from the outside, you tell me if I'm wrong, he was at a certain age where he doesn't need the wins, he doesn't need the losses, but he sees the bigger picture. He wants to get the next generation ready. He wants to help out. I mean, he obviously wants to get paid and he wants to work as well. But every other single person, dare I say, from Road Warrior Hawk to the British Bulldog to Jim Neidhart, all these guys who pass through ECW, but Terry Funk's the one who stands out as the one person who will actually not only do business, but he wants to leave the business in a better state than when he entered it.
Well, dare I say it? I mean, those other guys, obviously they could have gotten over in the right way with the right amount of time. I don't believe anybody could have got over like Terry for many different reasons. First and foremost, how many decades before he even got to 53 years old was he wrestling and NWA World? He had a pedigree coming into ECW. Having that pedigree is one thing, and coming in and then just beating a local guy like most guys would do it for a one-off. Terry came in, and Terry got over by being somebody that gave to the younger talent. Terry got over by associating himself, interacting, wrestling with, wrestling against the next generation. Terry got the next generation ready while getting himself over by getting the next generation ready. It was a perfect storm. And Terry was smart enough to see, if I get them over, I'll stay over. And that's exactly what happened.
So I don't really think there's any point talking about the match too much. I know it's going to be disappointing that I say that, because join the Patreon, for God's sake. We talked about it for 30 minutes. Every single move, every single ladder that went into the crowd, every single chair shot, every single thing that was unpredictable and you didn't know was coming, including getting beer spat in your face at the beginning. And then Terry Funk, I think, did something to you as well, didn't he? What did he do to you that you weren't expecting?
Which part?
Okay.
Well, no, I was laying there and he hit me with a trash can wrapped in steel, Joe. There it goes again. But it was the corner. And dude, there were so many spots that we all should have been Joey Mercury. Like so many spots, right? You saw it where should have just gashed me here, ladder just right to the face. Sandman already busted himself open on the entrance. Nobody's shocked by that. But yeah, I mean, Terry, this is one of those things where people thought, you had said it, that we were reversing whips backstage and, down the hallway, calling every spot. We only have like maybe 6 things. Now we have more planned out than we thought because we had to work on hard time and we were short on time towards the end that we'll get to. But we still were just kind of playing fast and loose and following each other. And maybe it was just luck or the grace of God, but it all worked out in the end.
What do you want to say about the actual main event, though? So for just to paint the picture, it is Stevie Richards versus the Sandman versus Terry Funk, and then it is a number 1 contenders match to wrestle Raven, who is the ECW champion, right after. So the bell rings, Terry Funk gets the win. You are eliminated first, but you hang around the ring for a couple more minutes, and then Terry and Sandman sort of speed through what they've got to do, and then Terry gets the pin, and then straight away Raven is in the ring after. And something you said on the Patreon that we will talk about more here is I mean, one, it's not really much of a match. It's just Raven beating on Terry. And Raven really is great in his role as just the nasty, and he looks so strong as well, you know what I mean? He, like, everything he throws is with intent, beating on a broken down middle-aged man who eventually, spoiler alert, squeaks out the win. But you said when we were doing the Patreon, I want to explore that more, that Raven wasn't happy with the ending of the match.
Well, there was that weird bell ring count, and then they went into the small package right after that. And I just remember him not being happy. And obviously, you could think at the time, and obviously you look back on it, it's like, the bell rang, whatever. But in the heat of the moment, and this moment's supposed to be Terry's moment, it's supposed to be it, Raven's got a very limited amount of time to get his face, his body of work on a national worldwide stage, So yeah, everything has to be tight, and he's a perfectionist. So that bell rang, or the bell ring, and I thought that way when he was explaining it to me, it was a major disconnect just before the actual finish or something. I don't know if it was supposed to be 1, 2, 3 or the kick out and then that. It's a very weird, it was all moving very. Now, I will say this, when Raven came out, the gear of the match at the end of Sandman and Terry was slowing down a little bit. This like kicked everything up 10 notches. Don't you agree with that? This was like, oh my God, and beating them bloody, putting them through a table, all that stuff. But I believe the bell ring got the fans on their feet, and then they came down, and then the pin happened, then they cheered. So it was like a, yay, oh, yeah, oh, yay. You know what I mean? That's what I think Raven had felt, that kind of like awkward pace and disconnect with the finish. But at the end of the night, people were all happy and it was great. You know what I mean? I don't think it hurt anything.
Yeah, was Raven always a perfectionist as long as you were working with him?
Yes, 100%, as he should be. Took everything. Now you might think, yeah, Raven goofed off. He was from a kind of a different type of environment when it came to workers. He famously, as Scotty Flamingo, right before he went out to wrestle, I think Johnny B. Bad at the time, was literally eating a hot dog as his music was playing and went out there. That's how relaxed, that type of approach is. I couldn't eat hours before my match. But Raven also took his character, his brand, the storylines, the finishes, everything wrapped around him very, very seriously, as he should.
One more thing I'll just mention briefly, I forgot to, was that Sandman was wrestling with cracked ribs, by the way, in your match in the three-way dance that I was remiss to mention beforehand. And of course, Terry Funk was always injured. Now, let's talk about Raven again. We'll talk about Big Dick Dudley, I suppose, as well at one point, because somehow we just brushed past that. But at what point did you know that Raven was leaving or considering leaving for WCW? Was this the kind of thing he would share with you at the time?
Yeah. I mean, I think this might have been, I mean, they were going to take the title off him, I imagine, anyway, and put it on Terry. But I think there was already rumblings that he was going to maybe go, or it was right after this pay-per-view, a lot like the Japanese BWO and talking all them going to WWF at the time. I think this pay-per-view put a lot of people on the roster on the radars of WCW and WWF. So it might not have been before this, but I sure remember it not being long after this, if anything.
What did he tell you? I mean, did he try and lure you over?
No, I don't think so. I don't know what. I mean, obviously, we got the act back together in WCW. We redid it from the very beginning. I don't know for sure if he wasn't pressuring me to go to WCW, but he was also, I guess, planning and then the blank contract thing happened. And I, of course, told him about that. So I think it was going into talk to Eric. Let's talk to Eric. Do you want me to talk to Eric? I said this, Eric. I can't remember exact chronological conversations, but I do believe the blank contract story, which we put up in a clip, the blank contract story led me to initiate more conversations with Raven about, hey, what's going on there? What are they paying? Where would I be? That was on me.
Do you know who... I can't remember if I asked you this in the previous show. I probably did, but did you ever hear about Raven?
Also, I was hurt.
Yeah, of course.
So I didn't know how much longer I could. And then WCW, I think he said they'll pay for surgery. There's different elements put into that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, did I ask you last time about the fight between Raven and Tommy Dreamer? About Raven leaving, and Tommy was like really upset over it?
No, I didn't even know about that.
Apparently so. Apparently they were very upset about Raven going to WCW, especially, maybe it was just more because they just bought into it, and ECW and WCW very much did not have a working relationship.
We all were MK altered. Yeah. We were all brainwashed. Yeah.
That being said, I don't even know where I'm going to go with that, actually. Oh, yeah, that was it. Do you know of anyone else that Raven tried to convince to go to WCW at this time? Aside from you? No. I'm
not aware of anything. I think everybody, just the atmosphere and thinking back on it, after that pay-per-view, everybody was well aware, including Paul, that we were now on the radar. Now, we were already working with WWF anyway, but now we're on the radar of both companies. And I don't remember him talking to anybody, but I remember everybody, you could tell it was on everybody's mind in a way. Like, oh, I could go there and make some money. Now we're,
You're almost auditioning, aren't you? Is it almost like a live audition kind of thing?
Yeah, you could say that. You could say maybe there was a time after this pay-per-view that guys were starting to work even harder to get noticed, not by Paul, but by other people. That could be an educated guess with that. But that might not have happened. That might have not happened if the Transformer blew during the pay-per-view. How do you like that segue?
Quite the segue as well. So shortly after the Terry Funk is celebrating covered in blood with Tommy Dreamer in the crowd with Hat Guy and some of the familiar faces of the ECW front row. Then the pay-per-view goes off air. Then what happens?
The power goes out like 20 to 30 seconds. I mean, it might be a minute, but who cares? Because it was literally immediately after that. I know when we were back there, people started running around as if it was still on the air, saying, oh my God, we don't have power. And then I think Paul or somebody was like, no, it's over, it's fine. And everyone was, oh my God. And I think that's why there were part of the reason, besides the fact there was so much emotion, that a lot of people were emotional, crying. And it was like we had just pulled something off that through the mass transit incident, through all the other losing TV, for all the other maybe potential lawsuits and everything else, people leaving, new people coming in, money invested, money lost, whatever it is, that we had accomplished something and hopefully we were heading in the right direction. We knew it wasn't like we were crying like it's the end of an era, it's the end of this and that. We were all emotional because that was a pay-per-view, but now it's the beginning of something new and maybe we're going to make money. Maybe everything's going to turn around.
Was it sort of ECW's Woodstock in that sense? Because when I say Woodstock, everyone 1969, the Summer of Love kind of thing. But a lot of people, when you look back on it, Woodstock was sort of the end of an era, not the beginning of an era. Because straight after that, there's like the Altamont Speedway gig where people died in a crush or stabbed or whatever. And it's sort of, that almost like killed the 60s. I mean, where does Barely Legal fall in that analogy? Is that Woodstock, or would the best of ECW be yet to come in 98 and 98 and 99? Where does Barely Legal fall in the ECW canon, I guess, for you?
It's a very interesting question because I never thought about it that way. I've been saying during this whole episode that there was so much reality-based storylines, there was so much emotion, there was so much buildup, that the real-world characters like myself finally kind of blooming into something else, like the coming-of-age moments in this pay-per-view, seeing the Japanese stuff, seeing, an emotional thing with the Pitbulls and Shane Douglas, whether it fell short or not. This is lots of payoffs, climaxes, at the end of an era with Terry Funk. Is he going to retire? Is he going to defend the title? Dare I say it, you might have a point. This might have been the very tip top of ECW urban legend and lore that could never be recaptured, because you had every match from top to bottom had something to it. How do you top that? Yeah, I would. And then you had obviously Raven leaving. My deal happened. Me coming back, me leaving again.
Terry, he retires this year.
Terry retires. And that was was that the retirement match with Bret Hart in Texas?
Yes.
That was
yeah,
I'm
it
not
was.
booked. I'm not booked.
I get on your trampoline, you, with the weights. You see, that'll sort your back out, I'm telling you. Yeah, he does the retirement match with Bret. I mean, obviously goes back to WWF within 2 months, I think, from that match, or 3 months or whatever it is. But I think Terry from ECW doesn't wrestle beyond 97. I think the last match with him was Born to be Wired with Sabu. And then he's done with ECW forever from that point as well. So there's a lot of faces that were really important in the early ECW days that are then gone. Yes, Raven would return, but it's not the same. You know what I mean?
I have to say, and people could argue, and there's lots of great talent that came after Barely Legal. They wrestled during the dark days of bounce checks, a lot of bounce checks, not getting paid anywhere from 98 to 2000. You're talking about the Danny Dorings, the Roadkills, the Chettys, the Novas, the Meanies, the Steve Carinos, Jerry Lynn, Rob Van Dam. Great. The roster was left nothing to be desired. But I feel like they never recaptured. Oh, and then the Mike Awesome debacle with the title. There were certain things that happened time after time after time again that just chipped away at the legacy of ECW. Do you agree with that?
That's a tough one, because 98 was a great year in its own right. 97 was a great year in its own right. It's a tough one to sort of like pin down what the best year for ECW was. I know you'll have your, dare I say, biases, because, you were in from 92 to 97. And not
94 to 97.
Yeah, well, you were on the first show, I guess, but I always like to throw that out there.
All right, you want me to say, like, I can't pin a year down, but I think the best year from, say, a connoisseur.
You can say the quintessential year of ECW, in your opinion.
The year I would tell people to watch, if you're an underground fan and you want to see stuff you haven't seen, and you want to go back in time and see like the birth of different characters, or see it first before you saw them on the main stage, 1995.
Mm-hmm.
That's the year. That's the Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Juventud, La Parka, maybe with Bleed in the
Why
96.
La Parka? I never knew he wrestled for ECW, but he did.
Malenko, Guerrero, Conan. Like, that is
Dudleys, the gangsters come in those years as well.
The
Raven.
Eliminators, Francine, Shane Douglas, myself and Raven, Meanie, Nova. These are things you'd be like, if you want to see the birth of everybody in ECW and what they ended up before they even became what they became, 95 is the year. Best year for money? No. Best year for exposure? No. But best year as far as, how can you say it? Like, I'm trying to think of it. Connoisseur. like the actual, like a fine wine or the, I don't
It's
know.
like the origin stories almost, would you say?
The glory days kind of thing. That the days that didn't look like it wasn't clean, it was gritty. We used licensed music. You know, you got the authentic ECW in 95. That's what I think you're saying.
So, Raven leaves not too long after this. As we've said before, he gets a 3-year deal at $225,000 per year. A couple of months after, and then I've just mentioned here, Tommy Dreamer gets into a fight with Raven over Raven's leaving ECW when Raven asked Dreamer if he wanted to join him. How dare you offer me a job? Anyway.
I hate money!
Well, you know, as you say, he drank the Kool-Aid, as the old story goes. And then Dreamer beats Raven on his final night. And it's the exact same booking almost as Barely Legal with Taz and Sabu. Is Tommy Dreamer finally gets the win after 2 years against Raven, then immediately goes into the Jerry Lawler feud. And then it's when, you know, Jim Cornette, Rob Van Dam, Sabu, Fonzie, etc. And that would bring in the odd WWF person as well, which is also weird, like Brackus or Philip LaFon and Doug Furness. Droz, I believe, as well, actually, at one point came into WWF.
Brackus?
ECW.
Did you mention Brackus?
I did mention Brackus, yeah.
Yeah.
My name was Brackus. And, like, he'd be really aggressive. But then he was a babyface because he challenged Vader in the Nation of Domination. Bizarre.
Makes perfect sense.
Of course.
I'll give you another little ECW trivia. I love Dreamer's gimmick because of this. He beats Raven, but then he has another mountain to climb. He wins the ECW World title finally and loses it that night to Just Incredible. Puts him right back at the bottom. That's what I'm talking about, Dakota Kai. Watch Tommy Dreamer. That's your babyface right there. That's the babyface you can be. You never have to win, but you'll always be over.
The very last thing I've got on my notes that I just love, I won't give you the date till the end. It's Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert spent the night in prison for being arrested for having weed on them, so you can definitely tell it's the 90s, not the 2020s, on the date of April 20th, 420. How wonderful.
Couldn't have wrote it up better myself, Daddy.
Were you there for
my horrible? That's Johnny Ace. That's Johnny Ace doing an impression of Tommy Rich. Thank you, everybody.
Do you know what? I don't know why people can't understand Tommy Rich. I don't know if it's just because, like, in England or UK, we're just used to every single American accent. But, like, some people are like, well, some people can't understand me there, James. And it's like, I can understand you just fine. But, like, loads of people say, I can't understand that accent. But I love his accent.
I think he said some people. I think he was calling you a nobody.
God, never. Never.
You're not. You're James Romero.
Of course I am.
On his way to 100,000 subscribers.
Before Stevie, let me tell you.
I hope so. You know what? That's the kind of heat I welcome. That make me mad. Everybody go subscribe to James's channel.
If I do 100, I'll do it for you 10 times.
Do it 100,000 times.
One for every sub.
You know what? Here's an experiment. I want to put on a 6-hour loop on the channel. It just keeps playing over. It'll probably get 1 million views.
It probably would. If you put adverts every 2 minutes as well, that'd be really good.
Everybody leave a comment below. You want me to do Jeff Jarrett's for 6 hours straight?
Do it.
I'll do it.
Do it. On that.
Well, you're the boss. You're the one that clears it.
No, you can. I keep telling you can upload whenever you want, and you don't.
Oh, copy paste.
You see, the trick is copy paste, and then you highlight them all, and then you copy paste again.
No, I Control A.
Yeah.
Command A, and then Control C. Control C, or Control V.
Right. Let's do the outro then. So this show is done for the week. Don't worry, we're back next Friday. I was going to bring this up off air. I thought about this early today. You know what we've not done, and a lot of people have written in or left comments or whatever, and we've never given them the option to. They want to do a fan Q&A just for one episode. So do you think if I put something on the community board, the YouTube community board, we give people a week or near enough that for a future episode Q&A? Would you want to do that for a bit of something
let's do it next week.
Yeah, we shall do that then. Okay, well, we are out every single Friday.
Settled. I don't have a gavel.
What are you doing then? Smashing my head like
gavel.
a rock?
No, gavel. It's settled.
Oh, I see what you're at. I didn't know you were doing some sort of legal thing there.
Crack on.
Crack on. On that basis then, as something I always say, over to Stevie for the outro and to tell you all about the Patreon as well.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. See, I can't do a take
I'm
two.
not editing that out.
Come on, man. Come on, man. I got a vocal implant.
Nope.
For God's sake. All right. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for watching episode 34 of the Stevie Richards Show, part 2 of Barely Legal. You want to go back to episode 33 and catch part 1. We appreciate that as well. But of course, James has written 2 books, one on Owen Hart, one on The Rock. Also, the James Romero YouTube channel, if it doesn't have over 80,000 subscribers by the end of this episode, then it will not have 80,000 subscribers by the end of this episode. I got nothing. There's no threat I can give anybody out there. But if you do, please support us on Patreon as well, patreon.com/Stevie Richards. James joins me on watch-alongs. We have behind-the-scenes stuff. And as a matter of fact, I'm working on, for the $1 thank you, brother tier, how we create everything on the Stevie Richards Show, pre-production and post-production. That will be up sometime soon in the future, not too far in the future, for everybody on the $1 tier. And then we have watch-alongs, behind the scenes, workflows. I interact with everybody on the $8 tier as well. That's our producer tier. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys so much. See you next week. Hey, by the way, I'm going to repeat it once again. Check out that community post. Leave your fan questions and comments for episode 35, which will be next week. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.